Chapter 1839. Seeing that Yi Xian didn't move, Xiaoan frowned and said, "You go first." An ancient fate, who had cultivated the external incarnation to great success, was no longer someone she could deal with now. After all, compared to this ancient fate, she didn't have much time to cultivate. Yi Xian still didn't move. Xiaoan was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly appeared beside her and chuckled. "Why do you want me to go first?" Xiaoan looked at Yi Xian. "We can't beat him anymore." Yi Xian smiled. "Then I go and you die?" Xiaoan fell silent. Yi Xian said softly, "Go back to Xiao Ta and heal your injuries." Xiaoan stared at Yi Xian. "You can't beat him." Yi Xian said with a smile. "So what? In any case, I won't let my woman die for me." Xiaoan frowned slightly. "Your woman?" Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. "A slip of the tongue. A slip of the tongue." Xiaoan glanced at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian said, "Hurry up and enter Xiao Ta." As he spoke, he directly sent Xiaoan into Xiao Ta. In the distance, Gu Ming sized up Yi Xian and smiled. "You are very outstanding. Even in the divine ancient star field, you are the most outstanding." Yi Xian smiled. "Thank you for the compliment." Gu Ming smiled and said, "Actually, I want to see the two people behind you. They are your father and sister. According to my investigation, they don't seem to be ordinary." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "You remind me of someone who was once as confident as you." Gu Ming smiled. "Who?" Yi Xian said, "Tianyi, Tianyi." Gu Ming frowned slightly. "Who is Tianyi?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "The patriarch of the ancient heaven realms Yi clan used to be as confident as you. But now, the grass on his grave is already several zhang tall." "Tianyi." Gu Ming shook his head and smiled. "You're comparing me to an ant?" Yi Xian said. "In the eyes of Qing or an old man, the two of you are no different." "Haha." Gu Ming suddenly laughed. "Yi Xian, you're so arrogant." "Of course, the reason you're arrogant is because you're ignorant." Yi Xian smiled. "Maybe." As he spoke, he opened his palm, and the green profound sword appeared in his hand. "I think that men should talk less nonsense between each other." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot. In the distance, Gu Ming suddenly flicked his sleeve. Boom! An earth-shattering power surged out from his sleeves. Rumble! A sword light shattered, and Yi Xian was instantly sent flying. But the moment Yi Xian retreated, a sword light suddenly appeared at Gu Ming's throat. One sword cut through the head. Crack! Gu Ming's throat suddenly split open. But the next moment, his right hand directly grabbed the sword light at his throat. He clenched his fist. Boom! The sword light shattered. But at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared above his head, and the next moment, a sword light slashed straight down. Gu Ming's eyes narrowed slightly, and he directly punched out. Rumble! Another sword light shattered, and Yi Xian was directly sent flying, while Gu Ming also violently retreated hundreds of meters. Sword draw to determine life and death. This time, Yi Xian directly superimposed 920 sword draw to determine life and death. During the time he cultivated in Xiao Ta's body, he increased the number of sword draw to determine life and death to 920. However, he found that the further he went, the harder it was to improve. In the distance, Gu Ming glanced at his right hand. There was a deep sword wound on his right arm, and the white bone within could be seen. Gu Ming's eyes narrowed slightly, and he raised his head to look at the distant Yi Xian. He was about to speak when the azure sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly disappeared. Gu Ming directly punched out. Boom! The azure sword was forcibly stopped by this punch. But at this moment, over a dozen sword lights suddenly flew out from the space around Gu Ming and slashed at his body. Boom! 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 In an instant, Gu Ming was directly drowned by over a dozen sword lights. In the distance, Yi Xian was about to follow up with another attack. But at this moment, the sword light directly shattered his face, and at the same time, an afterimage shot explosively towards him. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. He opened his palm, and the azure sword appeared in his hand, and then he suddenly held it horizontally to block. Invincible sword domain. Boom! Yi Xian instantly retreated thousands of meters, and as soon as he stopped, a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. In the distance, Gu Ming slowly walked towards Yi Xian. The sword is a good sword, and the sword technique is also a good sword technique. Unfortunately, your cultivation is too low, and at this moment Yi Xian suddenly disappeared on the spot. Gu Ming raised his arm to block. Boom! The sword light exploded, and Yi Xian retreated explosively once more. However, there was another sword wound on Gu Ming's arm. Gu Ming couldn't help but frown. Although there was a gap in strength between him and Yi Xian's sword could break through his defense. He couldn't let this drag on. Gu Ming raised his head to look at the nearby Yi Xian. He took a step forward, and with this step he split into 3. External incarnation. When he saw Gu Ming's external incarnation, Yi Xian didn't hesitate to turn around and directly disappear. He naturally wouldn't be stupid enough to fight Gu Ming head-on. Seeing Yi Xian escape, Gu Ming was stunned. He stopped fighting just like that. Shouldn't it be a fight to the death? Without thinking too much, Gu Ming took a step forward and was about to give chase. However, when he was about to give chase, he found that Yi Xian had already disappeared. Even he couldn't sense Yi Xian's aura at this moment. He ran so fast. Gu Ming's expression was a little ugly. Were young people nowadays so greedy for life and afraid of death? Moreover, Yi Xian was a swordsman. Right at this moment, his pupils constricted abruptly, because Yi Xian who had fled had actually appeared in front of him again. Yi Xian drew his sword and slashed. 920 superimposed sword drawing techniques. Gu Ming was shocked. He didn't expect Yi Xian to appear again. Without thinking too much, he raised his arm to block. Boom! Yi Xian's sword fell, and Gu Ming directly retreated thousands of feet away. When he stopped and was ready to counterattack, Yi Xian was already gone. He ran again. Seeing this scene, Gu Ming's expression suddenly became extremely ugly. One slash and then run. And he couldn't catch Yi Xian's aura. He had power but nowhere to use it. It was very sullen. And in another unknown starry sky, Yi Xian stopped, a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Gu Ming's strength was much higher than his, and most importantly, Gu Ming's physical body was too terrifying. If it wasn't for Gu Ming's terrifying physical body, he would have killed him countless times just now. The profound azure sword could break Gu Ming's defense, but it couldn't kill him. And at this moment, he finally saw his own strength clearly. With his current strength, if he didn't use the profound azure sword, it was equivalent to the divine spark realm. But if he used the profound azure sword, he would be invincible in the divine spark realm, and could fight against divine soul realm experts. But if he didn't use the profound azure sword, then the gap between him and a divine soul realm expert would be too huge. Especially a super expert like Gu Ming, who didn't rely on his strength. However, he wasn't discouraged. How many years had Gu Ming cultivated? And how many years had Yi Xian cultivated? Wasn't it normal for him to be unable to defeat Gu Ming? In terms of mentality, he still had the right attitude. Moreover, being defeated really wasn't a bad thing, because he knew what he was lacking. Right at this moment, Shaoan appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian glanced at Shaoan, and at this moment, Shaoan's arms had returned to normal. Shaoan sized up Yi Xian, and then he said, "Are you all right?" Yi Xian nodded. "I'm fine," Shaoan said softly. I never expected that he would have already cultivated that avatar technique to greater success. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "What divine ability is that avatar technique?" When Gu Ming used his avatar technique, he could only choose to flee. The strength of the 3 was too terrifying, and he couldn't resist at all. Shaoan said in a low voice, "It is a supreme divine ability of the ancient demon clan. When cultivated to greater success, one can form an avatar technique, and this avatar technique has at least 90% of the original strength." 90% strength. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. So abnormal? Shaoan nodded. Very terrifying. However, it is very difficult to cultivate to this level. Among the ancestors of the ancient demon clan, except for the first ancestor, no one has been able to cultivate it to greater success. I didn't expect that after so many years, Gu Ming had cultivated it to greater success. Yi Xian asked, "Is there a way to break it?" Shaoan shook his head. "It can only be broken by force." Broken by force. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Can you break it with my sword?" Xiaowen glanced at the profound azure sword in Yi Xian's hand and shook his head. "I can't. Because I'm not a swordsman. In my hand, the power that your sword can display is not as great as yours. But," she paused, then said, "if Jingji uses your sword, he should be able to fight him." "Jingji?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "Give it to her? I'm afraid she'll kill me first." He was also very wary of this Jingji. This woman was different from Gu Ming. Although Gu Ming was strong, he didn't play dirty. This woman, on the other hand, liked to play dirty. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Xiaowen, don't you hate her?" Xiaowen was silent for a moment, then said, "Her father treats me very well." Yi Xian said with a smile, "If you could kill her, would you?" Xiaowen shook his head. "I don't know." Yi Xian sighed in his heart. He knew that Xiaowen wouldn't kill Jingji. But if Jingji was given the chance, he would kill Xiaowen. Xiaowen suddenly said, "You heal first, then we need to prepare. Gu Ming won't give up. Also, we need to be careful because you have 2 divine items. I'm worried that the very race will be tempted." Yi Xian asked, "Are the very race very strong?" Xiaowen nodded. "Very strong. There is a person in their race named Very Yishui. This person was the strongest of the very race, and the strongest of the ancient god world. If they know that you have 2 divine items, I'm afraid they will be tempted." Yi Xian was speechless. He was going to be in high demand again. But he couldn't be so unlucky, could he? At this moment, Jingji suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. She smiled. "I have bad news for you. The very race is here. For you." Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1840. The Very Ones. Yi Xian was speechless. What he had been worried about had come true. He seemed to have thought of something. Yi Xian looked at Jingji, who shook his head. "I didn't inform them this time. The Saint Church and the ancient demons came here to find you. That attracted them." Yi Xian looked at Jingji and smiled. "Miss Jingji, have you made up your mind?" Jingji was silent. She understood what Yi Xian meant. Yi Xian smiled. "Miss Jingji, I will give you one last chance. If you don't take this chance, I won't give you any more chances. Believe me, you will never be able to escape this universe again, because the direction of your cultivation is wrong." Jingji frowned. "The direction of cultivation is wrong?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." As he spoke, he paused for a moment and said, "Xing'er said that." Jingji looked at Yi Xian. "Really?" Yi Xian laughed. "Believe it or not, it's up to you." With that, he turned around and left with Xiaowen. At this time, Xiaowen suddenly turned to look at Yi Xian. "Why are you holding my hand?" Yi Xian smiled. "Sorry, I'm used to it." Xiaowen frowned. "Used to it?" Yi Xian was speechless. Xiaowen wanted to say something, but Yi Xian suddenly said, "Xiaowen, tell me about the Very Ones. I have to make some preparations." Xiaowen nodded. She was about to speak, but she seemed to think of something. She turned to look at Yi Xian. "Can you let go of my hand first?" Yi Xian said seriously. "And you don't think I'm taking advantage of you by holding your hand, do you?" Xiaowen looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian said, "I am not that kind of person." Xiaowen asked, "Why are you holding my hand then?" Yi Xian quietly said, "When I heard that the Very Ones were coming, I panicked. Holding your hand, I felt more at ease." Xiaowen looked at Yi Xian. "Really?" Yi Xian nodded. "Really? If you're not willing, I won't pull you." Although he said so, he did not release his hand. After a moment of silence, Xiaowen said, "The Very Ones are strong, but you don't have to worry too much." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "I'm alone. How can I not be worried?" Xiaowen immediately said, "Don't you have me?" Yi Xian looked at Xiaowen. "Will you stay here forever?" Xiaowen nodded. Yi Xian said seriously, "Xiaowen, you're the best." Xiaowen glanced at Yi Xian. "What's good about it?" Yi Xian laughed and said, "Everything is fine." Xiaowen was speechless. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Jingji suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and Yi Xian frowned. "Jingji," Jingji suddenly said, "the person from the Very High sect is the Very High Water." Hearing this, Xiaowen's eyes suddenly shrank. "Very High Water?" Jingji nodded. Yi Xian turned to look at Xiaowen. "Is he very strong?" Shawan said in a deep voice. Very strong. He was very strong back then. And he must be even stronger now. The opponent's strength is definitely above the ancient demon clan leader Gu Ming. Yi Xian held Shawan's hand tightly and said nervously, What should I do? Jingji was speechless. Shawan was silent, and her face was grave. If the very high water was also targeting Yi Xian, the situation would be really troublesome. At this time, Jingji suddenly said, You can call for help. Yi Xian looked at Jingji and smiled. Miss Jingji, what do you want to do? Jingji smiled. Cooperate. Yi Xian shook his head. I said, You have no sincerity. Jingji's lips curled up. Sincerity is mutual. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Do I need you? Jingji was stunned. Jingji blinked. Have you seen Qing Er? Jingji stared at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian smiled. Do I need you? As you said, if I can't beat him, I can call for help. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Jingji rolled his eyes at Yi Xian. Why are you so hostile to him? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Because you have always been hostile to me. Jingji smiled. I am not hostile to you, and I dare not be. Young Master Yi, I have a plan here. Do you want to hear it? Yi Xian blinked. What plan? Jingji walked in front of Yi Xian and smiled. I will only say it to you. Yi Xian smiled. Shawan is one of us. If you want to say it, then say it. If you don't, then don't say it. Shawan glanced at Yi Xian and did not say anything. Jingji glanced at the two of them and smiled. Young Master Yi, you and Wujuan won't. Shawan frowned. Yi Xian looked straight at Jingji. Are you going to say it or not? Jingji glared at Yi Xian. We are both women. Why are you treating me differently? Yi Xian curled his lips. You are not my woman. Jingji smiled faintly. Then is Shawan your woman? Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. Damn it. I fell into this woman's trap. Jingji wanted to say something, but Yi Xian suddenly said, Do you still want to jump out of this universe? Jingji put away his smile and said, My plan is. A moment later, Yi Xian suddenly gave a thumbs up. Brilliant. Jingji smiled. Wait for me. After saying that, she turned and left. After Jingji disappeared into the distance, Shawan suddenly said, Can you trust her? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Shawan looked at Yi Xian. Why? Yi Xian said softly. Because she has seen Qing Er. Shawan was puzzled. Yi Xian smiled. Anyone who has seen Qing Er will lose their temper. After saying that, he pulled Shawan and left. If Jingji had never seen Qing Er, he would never believe her. However, this woman had seen Qing Er. Not only had she seen Qing Er, but she might have also been taught a lesson by Qing Er. Otherwise, this woman would not have taken the initiative to show goodwill. At Jingji's palace. On this day, Gu Ming came to Jingji's palace. In the main hall, Jingji smiled and said, Patriarch Gu Ming, please sit. Gu Ming sat to the side and said softly, This Yi Xian's strength is a little beyond my expectations. Jingji shook his head and smiled. Patriarch Gu Ming, I told you long ago not to underestimate this person. Gu Ming smiled. Actually, I am more interested in the woman behind him. Hearing this, Jingji's right hand couldn't help but tremble. Interested in the woman in the plain dress? Jingji looked at Gu Ming in front of her. She actually wanted to jump up and scold him. Who do you think you are? How dare you fight with Senior? She admitted that Gu Ming was very strong. However, he was really not qualified to fight with the woman in the plain dress. Gu Ming suddenly said, Miss Jingji, do you know the whereabouts of the woman in the plain dress? Jingji collected his thoughts and shook his head with a smile. I don't know. Gu Ming looked at Jingji and said, As far as I know, Miss Jingji has seen that plain dress woman through time reversal. I have indeed seen him, but only once, said Jingji with a smile. Gu Ming asked, Miss Jingji, how do you think I compare to her? Estimate the strength of both sides. The corners of Jingji's mouth twitched slightly. Estimate your mother's head. She was a little speechless. Seeing Jingji's strange expression, Gu Ming frowned slightly. Miss Jingji. Jingji restrained his thoughts. And then he said with a serious expression, According to my estimation, that woman's strength should be on par with the ancient Fate clan's patriarch. Equal. Gu Ming faintly smiled. That's interesting. I never thought that there would be such a person in this universe. Jingji laughed and said, Indeed, I didn't expect that this universe could actually produce such a person. Gu Ming slowly closed his eyes. I wonder if the Star Fate Gate has found any news about that plain-dressed woman. Jingji's eyelids twitched. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. This guy really sent people to look for the plain-dressed woman. Jingji sighed in her heart. In fact, she felt a little complicated at this moment. Did Gu Ming look down on the plain-dressed woman? Of course he did. However, from Gu Ming's point of view, Gu Ming had overestimated the plain-dressed woman. After all, no one thought that the plain-dressed woman had jumped out of this current universe, including her from before. When they targeted Yi Xian from the beginning, they were already destined to lose. This was also the reason why she immediately chose to side with Yi Xian. Kill Yi Xian? They would definitely die. Once the plain-dressed woman came back, no one could stop her. With a wave of her hand, the Saint Church and the ancient demon clan would disappear from this world. At this moment, Gu Ming suddenly said, Miss Jingji, I heard that the Supreme Life Water is also here. Jingji withdrew her thoughts and nodded. Yes. Gu Ming smiled and said, What do you think, Miss Jingji? Jingji smiled and said, Let's join forces to deal with him and Yi Xian. Gu Ming nodded. That's exactly what I want. Jingji suddenly stood up and said, Patriarch Gu Ming, my people have found that Yi Xian. Gu Ming's eyes narrowed slightly. Where? Jingji said, Let's go. With that, she directly disappeared. Gu Ming frowned slightly, and a moment later, he also disappeared from the hall. In a certain part of the starry sky, Yi Xian was flying on his sword, and Shaowen was beside him. At this moment, Jingji and Gu Ming suddenly appeared in front of him. When he saw the two of them, Yi Xian's expression instantly changed. You, Jingji said. Patriarch Gu Ming, I'll stop that Lord in Wujian. Finish him quickly. Gu Ming nodded. He took a step forward and directly displayed his avatar. Just as Gu Ming was about to attack, his expression instantly changed. He suddenly turned around, and a sword light slashed straight towards him. The person who attacked was not Yi Xian, but Jingji. This sudden turn of events caused Gu Ming's expression to instantly change, and he suddenly blocked with his arms. Boom! The sword light shattered, and Gu Ming rapidly retreated. At this moment, Yi Xian and Jingji disappeared from where they stood at the same time. The three of them attacked almost at the same time, and at this moment, a shadow suddenly flashed across the battlefield. Boom! Along with a deafening explosion resounding out, the two figures were pushed back repeatedly. It was Yi Xian and Shaowen, and beside Gu Ming stood a middle-aged man. When they saw this middle-aged man, Shaowen and Jingji's expressions both darkened. Great One Water. A super expert of the Great One race. Gu Ming suddenly turned his head to look at Jingji and said with a smile, Miss Jingji, from the beginning, my ancient demon race has been using you. And you have also been using my ancient demon race. Do you really think I wouldn't hold back? Jingji smiled and said, I was too careless. As she spoke, she turned her head to look at Yi Xian. Call for help. Yi Xian was silent. I want to call for help too. But how? Jingji looked at Yi Xian. Don't tell me you can't call for help. Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. Today is a good day. How about we let them go? Jingji stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian sighed softly. Miss Jingji, do you think Qing is interested in them? Jingji was silent. That woman might really not be interested in Gu Ming and Jingji. As if thinking of something, Jingji looked at Yi Xian in confusion. Why is your sister so strong and you so weak? Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, I actually want to know the answer to this question. Jingji. P.S. I really don't have the face to ask for a vote. No more begging. End of this chapter. Chapter 1841. Yi Xian and the others did not expect that Tai Yishui had joined forces with Gu Ming. This was a person stronger than Gu Ming. How could they fight? They couldn't beat him. In the distance, Gu Ming suddenly laughed. Miss Jingji, I'm really curious. Why did you side with Yi Xian? Jingji said calmly. If I don't side with him, I will be swallowed by you and the Greater One sect, won't I? The ancient demon clan had joined forces with the Greater One race, but they didn't tell her. They obviously wanted to use her to deal with Yi Xian, and then swallow her, and the Saint Church. Everyone was plotting against each other. Gu Ming laughed. Don't you want to join forces with Yi Xian to swallow my ancient demon clan? Jingji laughed. Same here. Gu Ming nodded. Indeed. At this moment, Tai Yishui suddenly looked at Yi Xian and laughed. Is the Xiao Tao in your hand really that amazing? Yi Xian laughed. Yes. Tai Yishui looked at Yi Xian. Can you let me see it? Yi Xian shook his head. What a joke. If I give it to you, will you give it back to me? Tai Yishui laughed. That's true. But since you won't give it to me, I'll take it myself. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. Next to Yi Xian, Shaoan stepped forward and punched. Boom! As the fist light exploded, Shaoan instantly retreated thousands of feet. As soon as she stopped, the space within thousands of feet of her collapsed and was annihilated. No match. Yi Xian's face darkened. Tai Yishui was indeed stronger than Gu Ming. Tai Yishui glanced at Shaoan and laughed. Lord and Wujuan, you were very good in the past. Unfortunately, you haven't improved in these years. You are no match for me now. Shaoan slowly clenched her right hand and suddenly disappeared. In the distance, Tai Yishui laughed and waved his sleeve. Boom! Shaoan instantly returned to her original position. At this moment, a wisp of blood was already flowing out from the corner of her mouth. Tai Yixing smiled and said, The current you is a little weak. Shaoan was silent. She had wasted too much time. Back in the day, she and the Tai water had a 50-60 split. And now, she was no longer a match for the Taixing water. Things are for people. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared beside Shaoan and said with a smile, Don't be discouraged. Shaoan shook his head. I'm not discouraged. I'm just feeling a little emotional. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. If you hadn't met me, you wouldn't be in such trouble. Are you blaming me? Yi Xian laughed and said, Strange. Shaoan lowered his head. I'm sorry. Yi Xian continued. I blame myself for not meeting you earlier. And looked up at Yi Xian and said nothing. Yi Xian chuckled. What about you? Shaoan was silent. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Jingji suddenly said, Please, even if the two of you want to flirt, can't you do it on a different occasion? Is this a duel? Shaoan glanced at Jingji and did not say anything. Yi Xian laughed and looked at Tai Yixing in the distance. Your Excellency, I heard that you are the #1 expert of the ancient god star field. Tai Yixing smiled and said, Brother Gu Ming is also very outstanding. I am not completely confident in defeating him. Yi Xian sighed in his heart. His words were watertight. Gu Ming glanced at Yi Xian. If you want to sow discord, I advise you to save your saliva. Yi Xian smiled and said, I just want to fight the #1 expert of the ancient god world. Tai Yixing smiled and said, Fight me one-on-one? Yi Xian nodded. Tai Yixing smiled. This chapter is not over, please continue. Sure. Gu Ming suddenly said. Brother Xing Shui, this person is not simple. Tai Yixing smiled and said, I know. However, I still want to see just how monstrous he is. Gu Ming nodded slightly, and then retreated to the side. In the distance, Yi Xian looked at Shaoan. Shaoan said in a deep voice, You. Yi Xian smiled and said, Let's fight then. Shaoan looked at Yi Xian for a moment and then said, Be careful. After saying that, she retreated to the side. She still chose to believe in Yi Xian. On the other side, Jingji glanced at Yi Xian, and then also retreated to the side. Tai Yixing smiled and said, Come. Yi Xian nodded and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already above Tai Yixing's head. In the next moment, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Sword draw to decide life and death. 920 sword draws to decide life and death. With this slash, the surrounding starry sky was directly shattered. A trace of surprise flashed in Tai Yixing's eyes. What a powerful sword skill. As he said that, he flicked his sleeve. Boom! An expanse of sword light shattered, and Yi Xian instantly retreated explosively. However, at the instant that he stopped, Tai Yixing's throat suddenly split open, and a sword light appeared. However, at the instant that Tai Yixing's throat split open, his body instantly became illusory. When he appeared again, he was already in front of Yi Xian, and then he smashed his fist towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian's pupils constricted, and he directly utilized the sword domain. Bang! Yi Xian's sword domain forcefully resisted this punch, but his face instantly turned pale. At the same time, he retreated explosively. He didn't retreat to space, but directly retreated to a world. Yi Xian was shocked in his heart. He'd never encountered such a situation in the past. Meanwhile, Tai Yixing appeared in front of Yi Xian again. He gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. Do you know what this place is? This is a space-time domain. A space-time domain that I've cultivated myself. Now that you're within my space-time domain, I can control your space-time. Yi Xian's face fell when he heard this. He hadn't expected that he would actually be within this fellow's space-time domain. Of course, he hadn't expected that he could actually cultivate a domain in this space-time domain. This wasn't just an ordinary level of terror. Tai Yixing continued. I can control your time at will within my space-time domain. You. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and the green profound sword appeared in his grasp. In the next moment, he vanished on the spot. Tai Yixing was stunned when he witnessed this scene. He fled. Yi Xian actually left his space-time domain just like that? At this moment, Yi Xian was within the same expanse of the starry sky. Meanwhile, Tai Yixing appeared before him. Tai Yixing stared fixedly at Yi Xian. How did you do that? Yi Xian suddenly started laughing. He wasn't laughing because he'd escaped Tai Yixing's space-time domain. He was laughing at his own stupidity, because he suddenly realized that he'd severely underestimated the green profound sword. The knowledge hidden within the green profound sword was truly too much. Just like earlier, he was completely capable of jumping out of the space-time domain. This meant that even though the sword was forged from the space-time energy of this universe, it had jumped out of this universe. Because the person who'd forged it had jumped out of this universe. If one could fully study this sword, then one could completely jump out of this universe. Even if one couldn't jump out for now, at least one would know the method. Space-time. This universe was formed from time, space, and matter. If one wanted to jump out of this universe, then one had to surpass the time, space, and matter of this universe. Suddenly Tai Yixing spoke. It's your sword. This chapter isn't over. Please continue to the next page. As he spoke, his gaze descended onto the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand. All of them looked at Yi Xian's sword. Tai Yixing chuckled. How interesting. I never expected that someone would actually possess such a deep understanding of the space-time Tao, and was even able to forge a sword from it. As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. The person who forged this sword was that woman behind you, right? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Tai Yixing smiled. Where is she now? Yi Xian smiled. Let's continue our battle. As soon as he finished speaking, he walked slowly towards Tai Yixing. Bang! A ray of blood-red light suddenly swept out from within him. The energy of his bloodline. He'd utilized the energy of his bloodline because he wanted to see his current limit. Only by knowing one of his limits would he be able to break through them. All of them frowned when they saw Yi Xian transform into a blood-red figure. The energy of his bloodline. What sort of bloodline is that? Jingji glanced at Yi Xian. She noticed that this fellow was even more mysterious than she'd investigated. She knew a little about the origin of this bloodline, and it was Yi Xian's father. However, she knew nothing about Yi Xian's father. It was too mysterious. Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. Sword draw to decide life and death. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword draw had overlapped up to 999 times. Because he'd circulated his bloodline to its limits. Tai Yixing's expression instantly changed when he executed this attack. 999 overlapped sword draw to decide life and death. As soon as this attack was executed, the region in an area of over 100 kilometers was instantly obliterated. As for Tai Yixing, who was the target of this attack, he sensed a trace of the aura of death. He didn't dare act carelessly. He raised his right hand slowly, and then he chanted silently. In an instant, a barrier of water suddenly appeared around him. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's sword descended. Bang! The barrier of water trembled violently. After a moment of silence, it exploded apart. and Tai Yixing, who was behind the barrier of water, retreated 3 kilometers away. Gu Ming couldn't help but frown when he witnessed this scene. The might of Yi Xian's attack was more than a few times stronger than the attack from before. This fellow's bloodline is actually so terrifying? In the distance, Tai Yixing glanced at his right hand. There was a deep sword scar on it. Tai Yixing shook his head and smiled when he saw this scene. I haven't been injured in many years. I never expected that I would be injured by you, Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't speak. He just opened his palm, and then the green profound sword suddenly flew out. In the distance, Tai water directly punched out. Bang! An expanse of blood-red light erupted. And then a figure retreated repeatedly. It was Yi Xian. However, Tai Yixing had retreated by over 1 kilometer. After Tai Yixing stopped, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. Tai Yixing's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he suddenly became ethereal. Bang! An expanse of blood-red light suddenly erupted. And then 2 figures retreated explosively at the same time. When Yi Xian stopped moving, a wisp of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Even though his current strength was extremely terrifying, there was still a gap between him and Tai Yixing. Suddenly Tai Yixing said, "Interesting. How truly interesting." As he spoke, he walked slowly towards Yi Xian. Bang! In an instant, an extremely terrifying aura enveloped Yi Xian. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes while the green profound sword in his hand started to tremble violently. End of this chapter. Chapter 1842. He couldn't beat him. At this time, Yi Xian already knew his limits. Even if he used the power of his bloodline, he still wouldn't be able to beat a powerhouse like Tai Shui. The gap was still a little big. However, this was also normal. After all, he had cultivated for at least 1,000,000 years. And how long had Yi Xian been cultivating? However, he wanted to force himself. Fight! Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes, which were blood-red like a sea of blood. Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot. Boom! Wherever his foot landed, the space instantly collapsed. And Yi Xian himself had already turned into a blood-red sword light and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already above Tai Shui's head. The next moment, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Sword draw to decide life and death. 999 superimposed sword draws to decide life and death. As the sword fell, a sword cry suddenly soared into the sky, and the starry sky directly trembled. A sword strike with all his strength. At this moment, Yi Xian didn't dare to hold back in the slightest, because the person in front of him was the #1 powerhouse in the ancient god world. In front of Yi Xian, Tai Shui watched Yi Xian's sword fall, but his expression was surprisingly calm. When Yi Xian's sword was still a dozen inches away from his head, his entire body suddenly became illusory. Chi! Yi Xian's sword fell straight down, directly piercing through Tai Shui's body. But Tai Shui was completely fine. Tai Shui suddenly punched Yi Xian's abdomen. Boom! Yi Xian instantly retreated tens of thousands of feet away, and his body directly cracked. However, Tai Shui's right fist was directly shattered by the sword light. Sword body. At that critical moment, Yi Xian directly activated the sword body. On the other side, Gu Ming, Jingji, and Shaoan were all extremely shocked. They were shocked by Tai Shui, and also shocked by Yi Xian. They were shocked because the Great One Water had jumped out of this space-time. The reason why Yi Xian's sword didn't work was that Tai Sheng had already jumped out of this time and space. He was not in the same time and space as Yi Xian. Space-time suppression. From this, it could be seen that they were not on the same level as the Tai Water. And they were shocked by Yi Xian because of Yi Xian's sword body. Just now, the 3 of them thought that even if Yi Xian didn't die, he would be severely injured. However, they did not expect that not only was Yi Xian not dead, but he was also uninjured. On the contrary, Tai Shengshui was injured. The 3 of them looked at Yi Xian. Upon closer inspection, they discovered that Yi Xian's skin was covered with all kinds of tiny sword qi. These sword qi were even thinner than a strand of hair. What kind of physique was this? Gu Ming frowned, and he was quite curious. Shaoan glanced at Yi Xian, and she was extremely shocked. She knew about Yi Xian's sword body, but she hadn't expected that it would be so terrifying once it was activated. Jingji glanced at Yi Xian. Damn it, this man really has a lot of trump cards. In the distance, Tai Xingshui glanced at his right arm. Not only had his fist been shattered, his entire right arm had been completely cracked, and his bones were exposed. Tai Xingshui looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, I have to say, you really surprised me. With your strength, even amongst the younger generation of God Ancient Star Domain, no one besides a Gui can fight you. Yi Xian wiped off the blood from the corner of his mouth and said, You jumped out of the space-time just now. Tai Xingshui nodded. Yes. Yi Xian smiled and said, If I'm not wrong, you can only jump out for a short period of time, right? Tai Xingshui smiled. So what? Yi Xian gazed at Tai Xingshui and said, Again. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. In the distance, Tai Xingshui had become illusory. He'd escaped through space once more. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's sword descended. However, Tai Xingshui's expression suddenly changed drastically. Tai Xingshui had silently retreated 3 kilometers away. Gu Ming and the others were stunned when they witnessed this scene. Yi Xian had actually pushed Tai Xingshui back. Tai Xingshui had jumped out of this space-time. Could Yi Xian have jumped out of it as well? Tai Xingshui stared fixedly at Yi Xian. You. How could you possibly? As he spoke, he suddenly gazed at the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand. Your sword. It's your sword. Yi Xian gazed at the sword in his hand with a complicated expression on his face. He realized that he'd greatly underestimated the green profound sword forged by Qing. He could have used the sword to jump out of this space-time. Qing had said that the sword had many uses, and he hadn't thought too much about it. However, he hadn't expected that the sword would have so many unknown and formidable uses. There were definitely many uses that he didn't know about. It was an omnipotent sword. In the distance, Tai Xingshui suddenly said, You actually relied on a sword to jump out of this space-time. His expression was extremely unsightly. Yi Xian glanced at Tai Xingshui and said, What's wrong with you? Tai Xingshui stared fixedly at Yi Xian and said, I cultivated for 300,000 years to barely be able to jump out of this space-time. But you actually relied on a sword to do it. Yi Xian frowned slightly. 300,000 years? Is it very difficult to jump out of this space-time? Tai Xingshui said angrily, Try it without using that sword. Yi Xian put the sword away and gave it a try. No. Yi Xian was somewhat embarrassed. Tai Xingshui said mockingly, Without that sword, you are nothing. Yi Xian held the sword and gave it a try. He directly escaped the space-time of this current universe. Seeing this scene, Tai Xingshui's expression became extremely unsightly. Soon, Yi Xian returned to the current universe and looked at Tai Xingshui and said, You too. It was such a simple thing. But you actually cultivated for 300,000 years. Look at me. I didn't even need to cultivate. I just held this sword and jumped out. At this point, he seemed to have thought of something and paused before saying, Sorry, I forgot that you have no sister. No one made a sword for you. Everyone. This sentence wasn't very lethal, but it was extremely insulting. In the distance, Jingji suddenly couldn't help but turn to look at Xiaoan indignantly. Look, is what he said even human? Xiaoan glanced at Yi Xian and said, It's a bit too much. Jingji shook his head. I really want to hammer him to death. Tai Xingshui's expression was extremely unsightly as he stood opposite Yi Xian. He felt like he'd been insulted. Yi Xian spoke abruptly. So in terms of the importance of having a sister, you don't have a sister, but you've cultivated for 300,000 years. I have a sister, so I don't even need to cultivate to jump out. Jingji couldn't help but become furious. Tai Xingshui, can you stop talking to him? Don't you want to kill him? Just do it. Why are you talking to him? Aren't you afraid of being angered to death by him? Gu Ming couldn't help but glance at Yi Xian and say, Brother Xingshui, kill him. He couldn't take it anymore. So what if you have a sister? He suddenly shook his head when he thought up to here. It's really great to have a sister. Damn it. This fellow relied on this sword to fight me, and Tai Xingshui. If it wasn't for this sword, then Yi Xian wouldn't be a match for them at all. Especially that jump out of space-time. The Tai water had cultivated for a total of 300,000 years. What about Yi Xian? That fellow hadn't even cultivated. Isn't that infuriating? The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. Tai Xingshui suddenly smiled and said, Yi Xian, I admit that the person who created this sword isn't ordinary. However, that's the person who created it. What does that have to do with you? Yi Xian gazed at Tai Xingshui. That's my younger sister. Tai Xingshui stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Even you know that it's your younger sister, not you. Yi Xian smiled. If my younger sister is strong, then I'm strong. Everyone was speechless. Tai Xingshui gazed at Yi Xian. Can you be a little more shameless? Yi Xian roared with laughter. Tai Xingshui, why do you have so much nonsense? Let's continue. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot. Hiss! A blood-red ray of sword light suddenly flashed through the battlefield. In the distance, Tai Xingshui's eyes flashed ferociously. He charged forward and punched. Bang! In an instant, the starry sky shook violently. Then, a ray of sword light shattered, and Yi Xian retreated repeatedly. However, as he retreated, he escaped from the current universe's space-time. When he escaped from the current universe's space-time, the powerful force from Tai Xingshui instantly vanished without a trace. Because he was no longer in this space-time, Tai Xingshui's expression instantly became extremely unsightly when he saw this. He could only temporarily escape from the current universe's space-time, but Yi Xian didn't seem to have this restriction. When he thought of this, Tai Xingshui felt even more unbalanced. Why was it that he had cultivated for hundreds of thousands of years to be able to do it? But this guy was able to do it so effortlessly. The more Tai Xingshui thought about it, the more his killing intent surged. He directly escaped from the current universe's space-time and appeared in the same space-time as Yi Xian. As soon as he appeared, Yi Xian suddenly opened his right hand. Hiss! A ray of sword light flashed through the battlefield. Tai Xingshui immediately punched. Bang! The ray of light shattered. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared above him, and then a ray of light slashed down. Draw the sword to decide life and death. Tai Xingshui didn't dare act carelessly. Even though there was a gap between him and Yi Xian's sword technique and the sword in his hand weren't ordinary. At the instant that Yi Xian's sword descended, Tai Xingshui's left hand suddenly burst into flames, and then he suddenly smashed his fist forward. Rumble! The space-time there suddenly seethed, and then an expanse of light shattered while Yi Xian retreated repeatedly. Tai Xingshui was just about to attack again, but it didn't take long for him to frown, because a mysterious force had suddenly appeared in the surrounding space-time. Tai Xingshui's expression changed drastically when he saw this mysterious force, and he practically didn't hesitate to vanish on the spot and return to that expanse of space-time. This was why he could only enter that unknown expanse of space-time for a short period of time, because that mysterious force rejected all who entered that expanse of space-time. As if he'd thought of something, he suddenly gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was still in that expanse of space-time, and the mysterious force had enveloped Yi Xian. Tai Xingshui couldn't help but roar with laughter when he witnessed this scene. Yi Xian! Yi Xian! This is the consequence of ignorance. At this moment, he was extremely happy. Yi Xian was equivalent to courting death. That mysterious force was so strong that even he wasn't a match for it at all. As for Yi Xian, he wasn't a match for it at all. Yi Xian glanced at the mysterious force in the surroundings, and his expression was quite unsightly, because it was a force that exceeded his understanding. It was absolutely not something he could resist right now. But at this moment, the mysterious force had sealed off this expanse of space he resided in. Just as Yi Xian was about to fight to the death, the mysterious force seemed to have discovered something and suddenly retreated like a receding tide. Yi Xian was stunned. Not only was Yi Xian stunned, but Tai Xingshui was also stunned in the space-time outside. His eyes were filled with disbelief. How is this possible? Saying this, he suddenly looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. It's the sword in your hand. It's your sword. Yi Xian looked at the green profound sword in his hand. Could it really be because of this sword? Thinking of this, he looked at Tai Xingshui and smiled. Look how great it is to have a sister. It's your fault for not having a sister. Everyone was speechless. Tai Xingshui was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Chapter 1843. When he heard Yi Xian, not only was Tai Yishui furious to the point of almost spitting out blood, even Jingji couldn't take it anymore. This fellow's words are too infuriating. However, she was even more shocked at this moment. Yi Xian was actually able to rely on this sword to jump out of this universe's space-time. What did this mean? It meant that the person who made the sword was even more terrifying. Of course, she'd personally experienced how terrifying the woman in a plain dress was. She was truly a godlike woman. At this moment, Gu Ming's expression was slightly solemn. The sword in Yi Xian's hand had greatly exceeded his expectations. From this, it could be seen how formidable the person who made the sword was. Gu Ming had a trace of worry in his heart. Right at this moment, Yi Xian returned to the battlefield. With the green profound sword, he could really travel back and forth between the two universes. However, he didn't dare to travel randomly in that unknown space, because he was quite afraid of it as well. Even now, he still felt a lingering fear from that mysterious force. Meanwhile, Tai Yishui suddenly said, "Where is the person who made the sword now?" At this moment, he was even more curious about the woman in a plain dress. Gu Ming looked at Yi Xian as well. He was similarly curious about the woman in a plain dress. Exactly how strong is she? Originally, he was very confident that he could defeat her. But now, he wasn't completely confident anymore. However, he wanted to fight her even more now. When had he ever been afraid of anyone? Yi Xian didn't answer Tai Yishui, and he slowly closed his eyes. At this moment, he was very excited because he'd discovered a formidable ability of the green profound sword. And that was the ability to travel freely between two different spaces. With this ability, he could be said to be in an invincible position forever. Even if he faced Tai Yishui, his opponent wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Most importantly, he could use this sword to study its principles, and then rely on his own ability to jump out of this expanse of space. A new door had opened for him. Right at this moment, Gu Ming suddenly said, "The sword in his hand." The sword. Tai Yishui's eyes narrowed as he gazed at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. At this moment, he intended to seize the sword. Without any hesitation, Tai Yishui suddenly vanished on the spot. At practically the same time, Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Rumble! The sword light shattered and Yi Xian instantly retreated. In the instant that he retreated, he directly escaped from the space-time of this universe. Tai Shingshui, who was about to follow up with another attack, was stunned. How were they supposed to fight? Although he could also appear in this universe's space-time, he didn't dare to fight with Yi Xian there. Yi Xian wasn't afraid of that mysterious force, but he was. Tai Yixing looked at Yi Xian and mocked. "Yi Xian, are you still a man? If so, then come out and we'll fight to the death." Yi Xian laughed and said, "If you are a man, then come in. We will fight to the death." Tai Yixing stared at Yi Xian. "You don't want to come out?" As he spoke, he looked at the awareness realm cultivator and Xiao, and "You can escape, but what about them?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "I'll give it a try." As he spoke, he suddenly appeared by Xiaoan and Ji Jing's side, and took their hands. A moment later, the three of them vanished at the same time, and they were out of this universe's space-time when they appeared again. Tai Yixing and Ancient Fate were stunned. "He can take others in. What the hell?" Xiaoan and Jingji, who stood by Yi Xian's side, were quite stunned as well. They hadn't imagined that Yi Xian would actually be able to take them in. What's going on? Jingji was quite excited. She ceaselessly sized up the surroundings, because such an opportunity was rare. If she could familiarize herself with this expanse of space-time, then she might be able to use her understanding of space-time to enter again in the future. Meanwhile, Yi Xian had brought her and Xiaoan back into the outside world. Jingji hurriedly gazed at Yi Xian. "Stay a little longer." Yi Xian was speechless. "She wants to stay a little longer. I can't let her off so easily." Tai Yixing's expression was terrifyingly gloomy, and he stared fixedly at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. "This sword can even take others in. What kind of sword is this?" At this moment, Gu Ming suddenly said in a deep voice, "Rumor has it that this person also has a Xiao Ta. That Xiao Ta is said to last 100 years inside, and a day outside. I thought it was fake before, but now it seems that this pagoda might really be that magical." Hearing this, Tai Yixing's eyes narrowed. 2 divine objects. He slowly clenched his right hand. If these 2 divine objects fell into his hands, he would definitely become the strongest person in the history of this universe. However, he didn't make a move and said, "Let's go." After speaking, he turned around and left. Gu Ming frowned, but he didn't ask any more questions, and also turned around and left. Seeing the 2 of them leave, Xiaowen, who stood by Yixian's side, frowned. "What do they mean?" Jingji said indifferently. "What do they mean? It's obvious. They can't do anything to Yixian now, so they're going back to discuss how to deal with this guy." Xiaowen was silent. Yixian could escape this space-time at will. It could be said that as long as he didn't want to fight to the death, even Tai Yixing couldn't do anything to him. Therefore, even if Tai Yixing joined forces with Gu Ming, it would be meaningless. At this moment, Jingji suddenly said, "You have to be careful. If I were them, I would definitely attack your friends and family. As long as I capture your friends and family, you have to fight even if you don't want to, unless you want to watch them die." Xiaowen frowned slightly. Tai Yixing wouldn't do such a despicable thing, right? Naive. Jingji sneered. Under normal circumstances, he would indeed not do such a despicable thing. But don't overlook one point, and that is that this fellow possesses 2 super divine objects, and these 2 divine objects are things that the supreme life water cannot give up. For these 2 divine objects, Tai Yixing won't adhere to his **T principles. Moreover, the 2 of them don't dare to give this guy too much time. Therefore, they will definitely attack again, and when they do, they will definitely be fully prepared. Yixian nodded. "So we have to make some preparations." Jingji gazed at Yixian. "What preparations? According to what I know, you seem to have quite a lot of friends and family." Yixian said. "Then what do you think I should do now?" Jingji fell silent for a moment, and then he said, "There are 2 ways. The first is to call your younger sister over. Once she appears, all the troubles will disappear." Yixian said, "Tell me about the second." Jingji glanced at Yixian, and then he said, "The second is to take all your friends and family into Xiaota. It should be possible for you as well, but it might be a bit more troublesome." Yixian smiled. "There's a third way." Jingji frowned slightly. "What way?" Yixian said, "To the ancient god world." Jingji's eyes narrowed slightly. "You want to go to the ancient god world?" Yixian smiled. "Can't I?" Jingji said in a low voice. "That's their headquarters. If you go there." Speaking of this, she frowned again. "Even the 2 of them can't do anything to you, so the rest of them certainly can't do anything to you. Moreover, with your strength, whether it is the ancient demon race or the greater one-sex powerhouses, for you, I'm afraid it will only be a matter of one sword." Saying this, her pupils suddenly shrank. She had always neglected a problem, and that was Yixian's strength. Now Yixian could not even do anything to ancient fate and greater one-life water. To some extent, he was already comparable to super powerhouses like greater one-life water and ancient fate. If he went to the ancient god world, it would undoubtedly be a great disaster for the ancient demon race and greater one race. As if thinking of something, Jingji said, "But what about your family and friends here? They are now your biggest weakness, and they will never let go of this weakness. They will definitely use it against you. Or do you really have the heart to leave them alone? As long as they go to Azure Province, then you, Yixian, will be in an absolute passive position. If you fight, Azure Province will be destroyed. If you don't fight, then you will have to surrender." Saying this, she sighed softly. Greater One Life Water retreated just now, but in reality, he was retreating in order to advance. Now that he has retreated, your situation has become even more difficult. Yixian smiled. "Then what do you think I should do now?" Jingji said in a low voice. "The best way is to call for help. If your sister comes out, what ancient fate, what greater one life water, they are all ants." "Yixian," Jingji suddenly said, "you can't contact her, can you?" Yixian nodded. Jingji frowned slightly. "Why can't you contact her?" Yixian said, "She may have already left this universe." Jingji was silent for a moment, then said, "Then there is no point in you going to the ancient god world. You can only kill the greater one life water and the ancient fate." Saying this, she shook her head. But the problem is, even if the three of us work together, we cannot kill the ancient fate and the greater one life water. Although the ancient fate and the greater one life water couldn't do anything to Yi Xian couldn't do anything to the ancient fate and the greater one life water either. The only difference was that Yi Xian had too many things to worry about. And these things were his fatal weakness. If she hadn't seen how scary the plainclothed woman was, she would have done the same thing. Because Yi Xian would have obediently submitted. Jingji sighed. Not only was Yi Xian's situation getting worse, but it was also the same for her and the Saint Church. Because the ancient demon and the greater one would never let her and the Saint Church go. At this moment, the space in front of Jingji suddenly trembled. Yi Xian and Xiaoan looked at her. And then Jingji suddenly looked up at Yi Xian. You don't have to feel bad. Yi Xian didn't understand and he asked, why? Jingji said, let me ask you something. How strong is your father? Yi Xian froze, and then he said, why do you ask? Jingji said, I just received news that the Stellar Fate sect couldn't find your sister, but they found your father. Yi Xian's face darkened. They aren't going to find my father, are they? Jingji nodded. The greater one life water and the ancient fate have already gone to find your father. So what I want to know is, how strong is your father? Yi Xian thought about it, and then he said, he's a little stronger than me. Jingji shook her head. Then why don't you go and save your father? Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1844. Save my father? Yi Xian was speechless. Seeing that Yi Xian didn't speak, Jingji frowned. What are you waiting for? If you're late, your father will be gone. Yi Xian was puzzled. Jingji, I don't understand why they want to find my father. Jingji asked in a deep voice. Was your small pagoda left to you by your father? Yi Xian nodded. Yes, Jingji knew. That's the reason. Yi Xian was still puzzled. Then they can just kill me. Why do they want to find my father? Jingji thought for a moment and said, it should be because they are curious. Also, they might want to eliminate any future troubles. Think about it, if they kill you, will your father let it go? He definitely won't let it go. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. Why are you still asking questions? Why aren't you going to save you? Speaking of this, she seemed to have thought of something and narrowed her eyes. Your father is not weak. Yi Xian smiled. A little stronger than me. Jingji stared at Yi Xian. Really just a little? Yi Xian nodded and said seriously, a little. Jingji shook his head. You never speak the truth. Yi Xian was speechless. Jingji asked again, do you want to go? Actually, she also wanted to see Yi Xian's father. What kind of person could give birth to such a shameless fellow? Yi Xian nodded. Of course. Where are they? Jingji said solemnly. The North Pole region in the Divine Ancient Star region. It's very far away from here. It's said that your father appeared there. The experts of Star Life Gate have already rushed there. Yi Xian frowned. His father hadn't left this universe? Was he worried about him? As soon as this thought appeared, he denied it himself. His father couldn't wait for him to live a hard life. It was impossible for him to deliberately stay behind to help him. Since it wasn't him, then why did his father stay behind? He was also a little curious. Jingji suddenly said, let's go to the Divine Ancient Star Field. Yi Xian nodded. All right. With that said, the three of them disappeared on the spot. Somewhere in the starry sky, Tai Shui was flying through the air, with ancient fate next to him. They were on their way back to the ancient god world. Gu Ming suddenly said, Brother Xing Shui, I don't think we need to look for Yi Xian's father. Although Yi Xian can use the divine sword to escape from this space-time, his family and friends are still here. As long as we target his family and friends, he will have no choice but to fight us. Tai Water Dao. I know. Gu Ming was a little confused. Since Brother Xing Shui knows, then why? Tai Yixing smiled and said, Brother Gu Ming, aren't you curious about Yi Xian's background? Yi Xian's background? Gu Ming was silent. He was naturally curious about Yi Xian's background, especially the two people behind Yi Xian, especially the plain-dressed woman. This person was able to forge that kind of divine sword, so he was definitely not an ordinary person. He was most likely a superior blacksmith. Tai Yixing continued. The most terrifying thing about Yi Xian is not his own strength, but the person behind him. To be able to nurture such a genius, the person behind him is definitely not simple. Especially that plain-dressed woman. This person can fuse the Tao of space-time into the sword. This ability. Saying this, a hint of worry flashed in his eyes. This woman is not simple. I never thought that our universe would have such a blacksmith. Gu Ming nodded. Indeed, she is not simple. But why have we never heard of this woman? Tai Yixing nodded slightly. Logically speaking, with such ability, this woman should not be unknown, but neither of us have heard of her. Saying this, he frowned. Could it be that the rumors are true? This Yi Xian and that plain-dressed woman are outsiders? Gu Ming immediately shook his head. Impossible. Tai Yixing looked at Gu Ming. Why is it impossible? Gu Ming said in a low voice. I've investigated Yi Xian before. This person is flashy and likes to deceive people. The foreign guests he mentioned must be fabricated by him to deceive us. Tai Yixing pondered for a moment and said, no matter what, since the Star Life Gate has found this person's father, we should go and meet him. I want to see how extraordinary the person behind Yi Xian is. Gu Ming nodded. That's true. He was also very curious about the person behind Yi Xian. Tai Yixing suddenly smiled. I hope they are stronger. Otherwise it would be too boring. Gu Ming also smiled. Indeed. Saying this, the two smiled and disappeared into the endless starry sky. On the other side, Yi Xian and the other two were also rushing to the ancient god star field. However, they were not as slow as Tai Yixing and Gu Ming. After all, Yi Xian had the azure profound sword. Although he did not know the exact location of the ancient god world, Shaoan and Jingji knew. It only took the three of them less than a dozen breaths to reach the ancient god star field. When they appeared in the ancient god star field, Shaoan and Jingji's expressions became serious. They were shocked by this speed. One had to know that even with their strength, it would take at least half a month to reach the ancient god star field, from where they were just now. However, Yi Xian only used less than a dozen breaths of time. This was too terrifying. Jingji suddenly said, this sword of yours can ignore the space-time of this current universe. Saying this, she took a deep look at the azure profound sword in Yi Xian's hand, and a complicated look flashed in her eyes. Your sister is not an ordinary kind of terrifying. Hearing this, Yi Xian laughed. Qing Er and I are both very powerful. Jingji said calmly. I don't know why young Master Yi is so powerful. Yi Xian said seriously. I have such a powerful sister. Isn't that powerful? Jingji's expression froze. After a moment, she gave him a thumbs up. Young Master Yi's skin is so thick it's rare to see. I'm convinced. Yi Xian was speechless. Shaoan suddenly glanced around with a complicated expression. She had left this place, and now that she had returned, her feelings were naturally complicated. Yi Xian walked over to Shaoan and said softly, do you want to return to the hallowed halls to take a look? At the side, Jingji suddenly smiled and said, yes. Marshal Lorden, do you want to go back and take a look? Shaoan glanced at Jingji and said indifferently, there's no need. Jingji smiled and didn't say anything else. The enmity between her and Shaoan had always existed. But she understood that now wasn't the time for internal strife. They had to deal with the hallowed halls and the ancient devil race first. These two were even more of a threat. Yi Xian suddenly said, let's go to the North Pole starfield. Jingji hesitated for a moment and said, I have to return to the hallowed halls to make some arrangements. Yi Xian asked, what arrangements? Jingji smiled and said, now that I'm on your side, do you think the ancient demons and the very ones will let the hallowed halls go? If I don't make some arrangements, I'm afraid the hallowed halls will be caught off guard. Yi Xian nodded. That's true. Let's go to the hallowed halls first. Jingji looked at Shaoan and smiled. Just as she was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Jingji, let's go. Jingji glanced at Yi Xian and smiled. Okay. The three of them headed to the hallowed halls. Yi Xian looked at Shaoan. He could tell that Shaoan wanted to return to the hallowed halls. But that was normal. After all, she was the sacred leader of the hallowed halls. After a while, The three of them arrived at the hallowed halls. The hallowed halls were located in Sacred, an independent small world. As soon as they entered Sacred, an old man in a white robe appeared in front of them. When the old man in the white robe saw Xiaoan, his face changed. You are Marshal Lorden. Xiaoan's expression was calm, and she didn't speak. As for the old man in the white robe, his eyes were filled with vigilance, as if he was facing a great enemy. Jingji suddenly said, "Can't you see me?" Hearing this, the old man in the white robe looked at Jingji, and he hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Sacred leader," Jingji said indifferently, "don't be so nervous. Marshal Lorden won't eat you." The old man in the white robe glanced at Xiaoan again, and he was slightly puzzled. Why is the sacred leader and Marshal Lorden together? Have they reconciled? Jingji suddenly said, "Pass down the order. Ask all the hallowed halls experts outside to return to the hallowed halls immediately." The old man in the white robe was stunned. He was about to ask something, but when he saw Jingji frown, he hurriedly said, "Yes." After saying this, he turned around and disappeared. Xiaoan suddenly said, "I'm going to see Master." After saying this, she turned around and walked to the other side. Jingji glanced at Xiaoan and didn't speak. The master Xiaoan was referring to was her father. Yixian hurriedly followed as well. He was also afraid that the two women would suddenly start fighting. Before long, Yixian followed Xiaoan to a cave at the back of the mountain. In this cave, there were hundreds of memorial tablets. All of them were the memorial tablets of the ancestors of the hallowed halls. There were a lot of them. Although cultivation to a certain extent could increase one's lifespan, it wasn't true eternal life. There would eventually be a day when one would turn to dust. Besides that, there were also some who died unnaturally. Xiaoan walked to one of the memorial tablets, slowly knelt down, and fell silent. After a moment of silence, Yixian retreated. Outside, Jingji was also there. Yixian chuckled and said, "Miss Jingji." Jingji shook his head. "Don't say anything, because I know what you're going to say." Yixian nodded. All right. He knew that the matter between Xiaoan and Jingji wasn't something that she could mediate. Unless they both became his women. Holy shit. Yixian was shocked by his own thought. Why would he have such a thought? At this moment, a phantom suddenly appeared in front of Jingji. The phantom glanced at Yixian, wanting to say something but hesitating. Jingji said calmly, "Young Master Yi is not an outsider. Just say what you want." The phantom nodded slightly. The Starfate Gate has been making a big move recently. They've set up a mysterious array in the North Pole Star region. I don't know what kind of array it is, but the Starfate Gate has sent at least tens of thousands of experts, including the sect master of the Starfate Gate. Hearing this, Jingji frowned. What are they going to do? The phantom shook his head. I don't know. Jingji suddenly looked at Yixian with an extremely solemn expression. They're making such a big move. They might be targeting your father. Your father is in danger. Yixian was speechless. Chapter 1845. Targeting his father? Yixian was speechless. Why did he have to target Qing, and his father? Was he unworthy? Suddenly Jijing asked, "How strong is your father?" She had investigated Yixian's father, and only knew that he was the Sword League's sword master. To be honest, the Sword League wasn't much. However, in her opinion, Yixian's father was no ordinary person. After all, Yixian's bloodline wasn't simple. Yixian said, "A little stronger than me." Jijing looked at Yixian. "Tell me the truth." Yixian said with a smile, "I think it's a 50-50 chance." 50-50. Jijing frowned. Really? Yixian nodded and said seriously, "Absolutely." Jijing glanced at Yixian. "As if I'd believe you." Yixian was speechless. At this time, the white-robed old man suddenly appeared in front of Jijing. The white-robed old man bowed. "Holy Lord, our people have rushed back to the Holy Hall and await your orders." Jijing nodded. "Got it." The white-robed old man glanced at Yixian, then retreated. Jijing suddenly looked at the cave. She smiled. "She cares about you." Yixian frowned. "Xiaoan?" Jijing nodded. "Yes. If it weren't for you, she would have attacked me." Yixian was silent for a moment, then said, "The conflict between the two of you." Jijing suddenly smiled. The old man inside said that I'm not as good as her, but it turns out that I'm not any worse than her. With that, she turned and left. Yi Xian glanced at Jijing. He could feel that Jijing still held a lot of resentment towards her father. Yi Xian sighed softly. He didn't try to persuade Jijing, because he hadn't experienced what Jijing had gone through. So he wasn't qualified to do so. One shouldn't persuade others to do good without suffering. At this moment, Shaoan walked out. Shaoan walked up to Yi Xian, looked around, and then said softly, "This is no longer the place we are familiar with." Yi Xian chuckled. "I'm here." Shaoan looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian suddenly grabbed Anne's hand. "Let's go." After saying that, he pulled Shaoan and walked into the distance. This time, Shaoan didn't resist and let Yi Xian pull him. Yi Xian turned to Shaoan and smiled. "Thank you." Shaoan was puzzled. "What are you thanking me for?" Yi Xian said. "For my sake, you didn't choose to fight Miss Jingji at this time." After a moment of silence, Shaoan said, "You need her and the Templar's help now." Yi Xian was about to speak, when Jingji suddenly appeared in front of the two of them. She glanced at the two of them holding hands and said with a smile, "Don't tell me you two are really together?" Yi Xian smiled. "Miss Jingji, do you have any news?" Jingji nodded. "I just received news that the Supreme Life Water and Ancient Fate have arrived in the ancient god world." Yi Xian frowned. "So fast?" Jingji nodded. "They should have received help from the Stellar Life Gate." Yi Xian said solemnly, "What kind of power is the Stellar Life Gate?" Jingji knew. It's a power that likes to study all sorts of things, especially the Tao of spacetime. Their overall strength isn't particularly strong, but it isn't weak either because they still have a living god emperor. However, no one has seen him before. They are experts in spacetime, and the teleporter they built is amazing. Under normal circumstances, it would take us half a month to get to where you are. But through their teleporter, the time can be reduced to a few days. With the help of elites like the Supreme Life Water and Ancient Fate, it can be even faster. Because they are strong enough, they can ignore the effects of the spacetime teleporter. Saying this, she frowned. They are a public power, and they don't get involved in worldly affairs. I didn't expect that they would openly side with the ancient demons, and the very ones. The ancient demons, and the very ones must have promised them something. Shaoan suddenly said, "The green profound sword." Jingji nodded when he heard this. "Only the azure sword in your tiny pagoda are capable of making the Star Gate side with them. Because with the characters of those fellows, they'll definitely want to study your tiny pagoda and the azure sword." Yi Xian said, "Your people said that the Stellar Life Gate is building a teleporter in the North Pole starfield. Do you have any specific information?" Jingji shook his head. "That place is full of teleporters. Our people can't get in, so we don't know what they are building. However, according to my speculation, they might be targeting your father." Yi Xian was speechless. Suddenly Shaoan said, "To the North Pole starfield." Yi Xian nodded. "Let's go." He wanted to see how these people were going to target his father. Jingji suddenly said, "Are we going just like that?" Yi Xian looked at Jingji. "What else?" Jingji said, "You don't seem to be worried about your father at all. Tell me honestly, isn't your father very strong?" Yi Xian said, "Miss Jingji, I told you before. My father is only a little stronger than me." "It's true." Jingji frowned. "Aren't you worried about him? He is your father. There are 3 super forces targeting him. Aren't you afraid that he will be killed by them?" Yi Xian blinked. Then he said, "A little scared." Jingji was speechless. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, "Let's go." After saying that, he disappeared into the horizon, with Xiao and Jingji frowned. "Unfilial fellow." After saying that, she also disappeared. The North Pole starfield was located in the northernmost part of the divine ancient star field. It was desolate and barren, so there were very few humans here. Even if there were, they were weak rogue cultivators. At this moment, tens of thousands of super experts were gathered in a mountain range in the North Pole starfield. Starfate sect. An old man stood in front of a valley. He looked down with a frown. This person was the sect master of the Starfate sect, Dao Xingzi. In the valley below, there was a huge astral formation. However, This formation was not yet complete, because there were still hundreds of formation masters, from the stellar fate gate, continuously drawing some strange runes at the edge of it. At this moment, two middle-aged men suddenly appeared beside Dao Xingzi. They were Gu Ming and Tai Shui. The two of them would have needed half a month to reach the divine ancient star field. But with the help of the Star Fate sect, the time had been shortened to a few days. Dao Xingzi suddenly said, Yi Xian has arrived at the divine ancient star field. Tai Shui frowned. So fast. Dao Xingzi smiled. It seems like it is really as you said. The space-time Dao contained in that sword really surpasses the space-time of this universe. Tai Shui nodded. This person was able to travel from so far away to here. It seems like the space-time Dao contained in that sword far exceeds our expectations. Dao Xingzi narrowed his eyes. The two of you, my Star Fate sect doesn't care who owns this sword. But no matter who obtains it, you must first let my Star Fate sect study it for 3 months. Tai Shui smiled. Of course. As he spoke, he looked at Gu Ming. Gu Ming smiled slightly. No problem. Dao Xingzi nodded. He looked at the formation below and said, once this formation succeeds, it will be able to reverse the space-time here and find the space-time of that man in green. Tai Shui frowned slightly. You're not just reversing space-time. Dao Xingzi smiled. Yes, it's not just reversing the space-time here. It's also exchanging space-time. In other words, the space-time here and the space-time of that man in green. Gu Ming frowned. Is that possible? Dao Xingzi smiled. Brother Gu Ming, of course it's possible. The space-time Dao is boundlessly profound. According to my Dao Star Sect's ancestor, if the space-time Dao is researched to the extreme, then not only can it reverse space-time, it can also reverse the future. It is to reverse the past space-time, and the present space-time, and the future space-time. Tai Shui said in a low voice, has your Dao Star Sect's ancestor ever done it? Dao Xingzi shook his head. Not even in death. Tai Shui nodded. That's indeed impossible. Dao Xingzi said softly. I really want to see the sword in young Master Ye's hand. Tai Shui smiled. Isn't he in the ancient god star field right now? Once we deal with his father, it will be very easy to deal with him. Although Yi Xian could escape from this space-time, the people around Yi Xian did not have this ability. Dao Xingzi nodded slightly. He looked down, and at this moment, the enormous starlight formation below suddenly trembled. Gu Ming asked, is it done? Dao Xingzi nodded. He raised his hands and chanted some unknown incantation. Gradually, the space-time above the starlight formation began to distort. The Star Life Sect's experts also began to chant incantations. The space-time above the starlight formation became more and more distorted and abstract. Gu Ming and Tai Shui stared at the distorted and abstract space-time. Very quickly, blurry figures appeared within the space-time. Suddenly, a green-clothed man appeared within the warped expanse of space. Seeing this, a trace of excitement flashed through Dao Xingzi's eyes, and he hurriedly roared. Space-time swap. Below, the Star Life Sect's experts roared in unison. Space-time swap. Bang! The space-time above the starlight formation became illusory. When it became completely translucent, a man in green clothes appeared before everyone's eyes. His main body. However, he wasn't in this space-time. He was in another unknown space-time, and he'd just appeared here in a special way. At this moment, a white furry little fellow appeared on the green-robed man's shoulder. She looked around curiously. Dao Xingzi stroked his beard and smiled. Found him. In the distance, the white little fellow turned to look at the man in green clothes with a bewildered expression. Why did he come here? Even though Dao Xingzi and the others had looked for the man in green clothes, he'd come here of his own accord. The man spoke indifferently. That unfilial son of mine must have gotten into trouble again. If he doesn't give me a reasonable explanation, then I'll break his legs. The white little fellow was speechless. In the distance, Dao Xingzi turned to look at Gu Ming and Tai Shui. Let's do it. This formation consumes a lot of energy, and we won't be able to hold on for long. Tai Shui turned to look at Gu Ming and smiled. Brother Gu Ming, do you want to do it or should I? Gu Ming glanced at the man in green clothes and grinned. I don't care. Chapter 1846. Dao Xingzi frowned slightly when he heard them. Don't underestimate this person. His intuition told him that the azure-clothed man in another dimension wasn't simple at all. At this moment he felt slightly uneasy. Hearing Dao Xingzi's words, Tai Yingshui and Gu Ming looked at the azure-clothed man in the distance, and the smiles on their faces gradually disappeared. They couldn't see through him. Both Gu Ming and Great Life Water couldn't see through the azure-clothed man in the distance. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from the side. Father! Hearing this, everyone turned around to look. Not far away, 3 people were slowly walking over. It was Yi Xian, Jingji and Shaoan. Yi Xian didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw his father. Damn it! This Star Life Gate is really amazing. It actually managed to get my father out. Impressive. The azure-clothed man sized up Yi Xian, and then he shook his head. Why are you still so weak? Yi Xian's expression froze. The azure-clothed man looked at Jingji and Shaoan, and he smiled. Are they your wives? Jingji and Shaoan's expressions instantly became slightly unnatural. Yi Xian was about to speak when Jingji immediately said, You've misunderstood. I'm not. At this moment, she was quite angry. Looks like this father isn't serious as well. The azure-clothed man looked at Shaoan. Then you are. Shaoan was about to speak when the azure-clothed man suddenly smiled. Since you're a member of the Yang family, you should at least show some respect. As he spoke, he opened his palm, and a ray of sword light suddenly flew out. In the next moment, the ray of sword light directly entered the space between Shaoan's eyebrows. Boom! In an instant, Shaoan's entire body trembled violently, and then an extremely terrifying aura suddenly swept out from her body. Rumble! The entire North Star region was in an uproar. No, the entire ancient god world was in an uproar. At this moment, everyone in the surroundings was stunned, including Shaoan. What happened? Jingji looked at Shaoan in disbelief. She didn't know what had happened, but she knew that Shaoan was transforming. A true transformation. What exactly did this azure-clothed man do? On the other side, Dao Xingzi stared fixedly at the green-clothed man. His fists were tightly clenched and trembling. At this moment, Gu Ming and the Great One Life Water's faces turned extremely grave. At this moment, an extremely terrifying aura suddenly erupted from Shaoan in the distance. Boom! In an instant, the entire world became illusory, and her soul slowly floated out of her body. At the same time, her physical body started to disintegrate bit by bit. Everyone was dumbfounded. What was he doing? Decompose the body. Before long, Shaoan's body vanished completely, leaving behind only his soul. However, at that moment, a stone door gradually appeared in the depths of the distant starry sky. Under everyone's gaze, the stone door slowly opened, and an ancient voice came from within. Enter my God's gate, and you can forge your fate soul. Are you willing? Gate of God? Everyone was dumbfounded. Shaoan was also dumbfounded. Meanwhile, the green-clothed man suddenly laughed and said, How can a tiny divine sect like you covet the members of my Yang clan? Hurry up and cast a bright soul for her, otherwise, I'll exterminate your entire family. Everyone! How dare you? An angry shout suddenly resounded from within the divine gate. Who are you? How dare you look down on my divine gate, you? The green-clothed man suddenly drew his sword and slashed, and a ray of sword light directly entered the divine gate. Boom! The divine gate trembled violently and then cracked. In the next moment, a voice suddenly resounded. Boss, please calm down. We'll immediately cast a bright soul for her. As soon as the voice resounded, countless rays of white light suddenly surged out from the stone door. The white light gushed out from the stone door, and surged into Shaoan's body like a tide. Boom! In an instant, Shaoan's soul directly trembled violently, and gradually, her physical body began to condense again. With a wave of his hand, Shaoan's physical body completely recovered. Not only that, but the space-time around her actually became distorted, and under everyone's gaze, Shaoan directly escaped from the space-time of this universe. Not far in front of her, a stone staircase appeared, and this stone staircase led directly to the stone door. Whether it was the current Shaoan, the stone staircase, or the stone door, none of them belonged to this space-time. Above the divine soul. At this moment, the nearby star child suddenly said in a trembling voice, She's already above the divine soul. What was above the divine soul? No one knew. Because in history, no one had ever broken through to the divine soul realm. Even the supreme life water had only reached the divine soul realm. Of course, there were strong and weak divine souls. However, no one knew what realm was above the divine soul realm. At this moment, Shawan had directly reached above the divine soul realm. At this moment, the green-clothed man suddenly waved his right hand, and the stone staircase in front of Shawan vanished. The stone door even trembled violently and then disappeared. Shawan looked at her hands, and in the next moment, she slowly pressed her right hand down. Boom! In an instant, the space-time of the entire North Pole star region became distorted and was about to shatter. Seeing this scene, the expressions of Dao Xingzi and the others changed drastically. Shawan withdrew her hand, looked at the green-clothed man, and bowed slightly. Thank you. At this moment, she had already left the space-time of this universe. The green-clothed man smiled slightly. We're all family, so there's no need to be so polite. Shawan. At the side, Yi Xian suddenly said, Dad, do it for me. Let me jump out of this universe as well. The green-clothed man sized up Yi Xian and shook his head. You can't. Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. Why? The green-clothed man said, You're too weak. Yi Xian. Suddenly, Dao Xingzi's voice trembled. Who exactly are you? The green-clothed man looked at Dao Xingzi and smiled. Didn't you come looking for me? Why are you asking me who I am? Dao Xingzi bowed slightly and spoke respectfully. Senior, this is a misunderstanding. The green-clothed man drew his sword and slashed. Hiss! In an instant, the heads of tens of thousands of experts from the Life Star sect flew into the air. This scene was extremely bloody. The green-clothed man looked at Dao Xingzi and smiled. This is also a misunderstanding. Dao Xingzi, the green-clothed man was suddenly puzzled. There's something I'm very puzzled about. The conflict between you and my son is a matter between the two of you, and I have no intention of interfering. But why didn't you target him instead of me? Why is that? Yi Xian suddenly said. They want to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. The green-clothed man glared at Yi Xian. Can't you deal with this yourself? Don't ask me and Tianming to help you so easily. Yi Xian said seriously. Father, you have to have a conscience when you speak. I've never taken the initiative to look for you and Qing. Right? The heavens have pity on me. They're the ones who brought this upon themselves. It has nothing to do with me. The green-clothed man was speechless. That seemed to be the case. Yi Xian continued. Actually, even without you and Qing I can still deal with them. They are like dust to me, and I can destroy them with a wave of my hand. Hearing this, everyone looked at Yi Xian. Destroy with a wave of his hand? Was he serious? The green-clothed man smiled. Then you deal with them yourself. As he spoke, his body suddenly became illusory. Seeing this, Yi Xian's eyelids twitched, and he hurriedly said, Father! Wait! The green-clothed man smiled. What are you doing? Yi Xian said seriously. Father, do you know why they came looking for you and not Qing? Do you? The green-clothed man frowned. Why? Yi Xian said seriously. They said that you're weaker than Qing and that you're easier to bully. Fuck. The green-clothed man suddenly looked at Dao Xingzi. In the next moment, Dao Xingzi's father was sent flying. At the same time, two rays of light shot into the space between Ancient Fate and Tai Yisheng's eyebrows. Rumble. Ancient Fate and Tai Yisheng's bodies instantly shattered, and only their souls remained. They were instantly killed. All three of them were dumbfounded. This was the first time the green-clothed man had attacked, and all three of them had been instantly killed. Dao Xingzi, who only had his soul left, was stunned. What did I do? Could it be that he was courting death? On the other side, Jingji suddenly looked at Yi Xian. She stared at Yi Xian. You said that your father is a little stronger than you? Yi Xian blinked. Yes. Jingji said angrily. Shameless. Is this a little stronger? It's 1 billion points, right? Yi Xian. At this moment, Tai Yisheng suddenly said, You've already jumped out of this universe. Hearing this, everyone looked at the green-clothed man. The green-clothed man suddenly opened his palm, and a ruler appeared in his hand. He waved it casually. Boom! Yi Xian, who was on the ground, was sent flying. While he was flying, his body instantly cracked. Everyone was dumbfounded. Why did he hit his son? After Yi Xian stopped, he was also dumbfounded. He looked at the green-clothed man. Father, you? The green-clothed man stared at Yi Xian. Your strength isn't much, and you have a lot of tricks. You want to surpass me in Tianming? What do you have to surpass us? Do you think you're shameless? At this moment, Xiao Tao and Yi Xian's body suddenly couldn't help but say, Master, little master inherited your shamelessness. Hearing this, the white little guy on the green-clothed man's shoulder opened his eyes wide. Did Xiao Tao become so arrogant? The green-clothed man opened his palm, and Xiao Tao appeared in front of him. Xiao Tao hurriedly said, Master, what are you doing? The green-clothed man waved his ruler. Bang! Xiao Tao was directly sent flying, and when he stopped, his body directly cracked. Xiao Tao said with a trembling voice, Master. The green-clothed man waved his ruler again. Bang! 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 In next to no time, numerous shrill cries resounded. Not only Xiao Tao, but also Yi Xian. Both of them were being beaten. In the distance, Xiao Tao wailed, Master, I'm now the #1 pagoda in the universe. Leave me some face. The green-clothed man suddenly waved his ruler. Bang! Xiao Tao was swept to the end of the starry sky, but in the next moment, he was forcefully sent back by a powerful force. Just like that, the man and the pagoda were swept back and forth by the green-clothed man like a ball. Little master, let's join forces and rebel. I think with our current strength, we should be able to fight master head-on. Okay. The green-clothed man was about to attack. At this moment, Xiao Tao suddenly shook violently, and a powerful force surged out from his body. Seeing this, the white little guy on the green-clothed man's shoulder opened his mouth, and his face was filled with disbelief. What exactly did Xiao Tao go through? How did he become so arrogant? He actually wants to fight back. He's even more arrogant than Arya. Xiao Tao suddenly said, Little master, go. As soon as he finished speaking, he directly charged towards the green-clothed man. However, Yi Xian did not move. The green-clothed man waved his ruler lightly, and Xiao Tao was directly hit on the spot. In the distance, Yi Xian hurriedly bowed respectfully. Father, I was wrong. Xiao Tao. Chapter 1847. Go against Pops? In fact, Yi Xian was a little speechless. This Xiao Tao was even more arrogant than him. But it made sense. Ever since he was transformed by Qing, this Xiao Tao had become arrogant. He did have the capital to be arrogant. But it depended on the person. Who was this? This was Pops. Not to mention him and Xiao Tao. Even Qing, might not be able to do anything to Pops. This Xiao Tao actually wanted to go against Pops. Who knew what he was thinking? The green-clothed man looked at Xiao Tao. I haven't seen you for a while. Xiao Tao, you've become more capable. Xiao Tao said with a trembling voice, Master, it was young master who told me to do this. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. Fuck, this Xiao Tao actually tried to frame me. The green-clothed man glanced at Yi Xian and sneered. After this Xiao Tao followed you, he actually became so flashy. You're really capable. Yi Xian, the green-clothed man suddenly said. Do you know why I hit you? Yi Xian hesitated and said, I don't know. The green-clothed man said, There's no other reason. I just wanted to beat you up. Yi Xian's expression froze. The green-clothed man looked at Yi Xian and sighed after a while. Yi Xian hesitated and said, Pops, if there's anything, just say it. The green-clothed man said, It's also my fault. As he spoke, he suddenly looked at Tai Yishui and Gu Ming. These two have forces behind them, right? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. The green-clothed man looked at Yi Xian. Go and slaughter them. Slaughter. Everyone was stunned. Yi Xian was also stunned. Slaughter. The green-clothed man stared at Yi Xian. Is there a problem? Yi Xian was silent. The green-clothed man said, I don't want to talk about principles with you. Now go slaughter their forces. Yi Xian thought for a moment and nodded. All right. With that, he turned around and left. Meanwhile, Tai Yixing spoke abruptly. We've lost. He was admitting defeat. The azure-robed man glanced at Tai Yiwater. Admit defeat? Do you think it's that simple? Tai Yixing looked at the green-robed man. You have already jumped out of this universe. Don't you feel that you are bullying the weak? The green-robed man smiled and said, When you were targeting my son, did you ever think about the problem of bullying the weak? Tai Yingshui's expression was somewhat ugly. Sir, this is a matter between the two of us. It has nothing to do with our clansmen. You. The blue-clothed man shook his head. Don't try to argue with me. I only know that if you touch my people, I will exterminate your entire family. Tai Yixingshui. By now, Yi Xian had arrived at the very first. By now, the very first had learned of what had happened in the North Pole starfield. The entire very first was on high alert. Suddenly, an old man appeared in front of Yi Xian. The old man bowed and said, Mr. Yi, this is the fault of the very first. Please, Mr. Yi, spare the lives of the tens of thousands of very first. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then shook his head. No. After he spoke, the deep green sword flew out of his hand. Slash! The old man's head flew off his neck. There were many elites in the very first, but aside from elites like Tai Yixing, no one could stop Yi Xian, who was wielding the deep green sword. 2 hours later, Yi Xian left the very first. By now he was covered in blood. As he killed and killed, the bloodline power in his body automatically activated. After destroying the very first, Yi Xian went to the ancient demon. 2 hours later, Yi Xian returned to the green-robed man in the North Pole starfield. The very first and the ancient demon were gone. The green-robed man looked at Yi Xian. Do you know why I told you to kill them? Yi Xian nodded. I do. The green-robed man said, Tell me. Yi Xian said, Because if I fail, my family and loved ones will be slaughtered. They will not show me mercy. The green-robed man nodded. It is good that you know this. You did not disappoint me. Remember this, kid. In this world, if you are not ruthless, you will not be able to stand firm. Especially when you have so many friends and loved ones. You can be merciful, but you cannot be merciful to your enemies. If they are enemies, you must kill them all. You must destroy them. Do not give them a chance to take revenge. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. The green-robed man nodded. I do not want you to be a heartless man. I do not want you to be like your father. I just want you to be more ruthless. A man must be ruthless when he needs to be. He must not be merciful. The Yang family does not bully others, but we will not let others bully us. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Meanwhile, Tai Yingshui spoke abruptly. Exactly how strong are you? How strong? Everyone looked at the green-robed man. The green-robed man waved his sleeves. Tai Yingshui, the ancient life, and Dao Xingzi were erased. He had no interest in ants like them. The moment he was erased, Dao Xingzi's intestines were ruined. F***ck. What had he done? He had used the power of the entire sect to activate the space-time formation, but he had summoned such a monster. How stupid was he? This was the legendary courting death. The green-robed man wanted to say something. Yi Xian said, What do you want to say, Dad? The green-robed man sighed. There are some things that I will not tell you. Otherwise you will be shocked. Yi Xian was speechless. The green-clothed man glanced at the surroundings and said, I'm leaving. Yi Xian frowned. So soon? The green-robed man smiled. There is no point in staying here. It is time for you to leave this universe. Yi Xian hurried to ask, Is there another universe out there? The green-robed man smiled. Go and see for yourself. As he spoke, his body became illusory. The white girl on his shoulder suddenly flew to Xiao Ta. She waved her claw. Xiao Ta's body was filled with violet energy. Xiao Ta's injuries started to recover. Xiao Ta was touched. Little White is the best. Whitey blinked its eyes, and then waved its little claws quickly. She meant to tell Xiao Ta not to be so arrogant. Xiao Ta was speechless. Meanwhile, Little White looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian quickly took out a tonghulu and gave it to the white girl. The white little creature grinned. She took out a mustard seed ring and gave it to Yi Xian. Then she waved her little paw gently. Yi Xian smiled. Goodbye. The white girl returned to the green-robed man's shoulder and started to lick the tonghulu that Yi Xian had given her. Right at this moment, Shawan suddenly said when the green-clothed man was about to leave. Senior, what cultivation do I belong to right now? The green-robed man looked at him and shook his head. I don't know. And was stunned. The green-robed man smiled. You can leave this universe now. However, this is just the beginning. Shaoan's expression turned grave. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Dad, let's help Miss Jingji. Hearing this, Jingji turned his head to look at Yi Xian and was struck dumb. She hadn't expected that Yi Xian would speak for her. The green-robed man glanced at Jingji and smiled. All right. As he spoke, he pointed with his finger, and a strand of sword energy shot into the space between Jingji's brows. Bang! Jingji's body trembled violently. Then a powerful aura swept out from her body. Yi Xian was curious. Dad, can you help others improve their cultivation by force? The green-robed man shook his head. No. The reason they can't break through their limits isn't entirely because of themselves. Yi Xian frowned. Are there other reasons? The green-robed man nodded. There are some other reasons. You'll slowly understand them when you leave this universe and enter that stone door. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. You're keeping me in suspense again. The green-robed man said. Kid, all I can tell you is that the three of us are interested in something. Do you think something that can interest the three of us can be ordinary? You'll have to walk your own path from now on. I came back this time to see you. I don't know how long it will be before we meet again. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Are you exaggerating? The green-robed man laughed. He suddenly looked towards the end of the starry sky. She's gone. I have to go as well. With that, he disappeared with the little white fellow. Yi Xian frowned. What did Dad, Qinger, and Big Brother discover? Somewhere in an unknown galaxy, a woman in a plain dress was walking slowly. The starry sky had no end. The woman in the plain dress walked slowly. After walking for an unknown amount of time, she stopped. Not far in front of her was a small thatched hut. An old man lay in front of the hut, and beside him was a fish tank. The old man lay on a bamboo chair. He glanced at the woman and narrowed his eyes. The woman in the plain dress walked towards the old man. The old man looked at her. You can walk out of the circle we drew with your own strength. The woman in the plain dress did not speak. She continued walking. The old man stood up. He was about to speak when the woman in the plain dress disappeared. When she reappeared, she was behind the old man. Chi! The old man's throat split open. Blood spurted out. The old man's eyes widened in disbelief. How is this possible? You're just a lowly person raised in captivity. How could you kill me? The woman in the plain dress walked to the fish tank. It was not a fish, but an endless starry sky. Monitoring. The old man was monitoring the current universe. The woman in the plain dress turned to look at the old man who was still breathing. You're raising the living beings in the current universe. The old man's eyes widened as if he had lost his soul. You're just a lowly person raised in captivity. You can't kill me. This is impossible. The woman in the plain dress did not speak. She looked down at the fish tank. As she looked, she saw a person. Yi Xian. Seeing Yi Xian, the woman in the plain dress curled up the corners of her mouth. Her smile made the whole world pale. At this moment, the old man was about to speak. However, a sword suddenly disappeared into his mouth. In the distance, the woman in the plain dress looked at the fish tank. Don't disturb me. I'm looking at my brother. The old man. Chapter 1848. The plain-dressed woman watched for a long time before speaking. She turned to look at the disbelieving old man. She opened her palm and pressed it down lightly. Bang! In an instant, the space around the old man twisted and became illusory. Gradually, the old man turned into a huge old man. From the outside, he looked no different from a human. However, he was more than 3 times bigger than a human. Not only that, his body was covered in a layer of white light. At first glance, he looked like a man made of light. This was the old man's real body. The plain-dressed woman sized up the old man. What is this? So ugly. The old man roared. Lowly human. You are all created by us, the God clan. How dare you? The plain-dressed woman waved her sleeve. A ray of sword light pierced the old man's forehead. Bang! The layer of light on the old man's body shattered, and only an illusory soul remained. The old man's expression froze and his eyes were filled with fear. You? How could you hurt me? The plain-dressed woman said. You created humans. The old man stared at the plain-dressed woman. At this moment he finally became clear-headed. The human before him was different. At this moment, an extremely terrifying aura suddenly spread from afar. Seeing this, the old man's expression became ferocious. Lord Wu Wei is here. Woman, you are finished. You. The plain-dressed woman suddenly drew her sword and slashed. Chi. In the distance, a bloody head flew out. Instant kill. Seeing this, the old man was dumbfounded. Instant kill. The plain-dressed woman looked around and shook her head. A trace of disappointment flashed in her eyes. Are the so-called God clan that created humans so weak? As she spoke, she looked at the old man in confusion. Didn't you create humans? Why are you so weak? The old man's expression was extremely ugly. Lowly human, if you want to kill me, then kill me. Don't insult me. The God clan is not something that lowly humans like you can insult. You. The plain-dressed woman shook her head. I won't kill you. As she spoke, she walked away. After taking 2 steps, she turned to look at the old man. Because you are too weak to die under my sword. Puff. The old man spat out a mouthful of blood. Meanwhile, the woman in a plain dress had already vanished at the end of the horizon. The old man's expression was unsightly to the extreme. How could this human be so strong? At that moment, a middle-aged man appeared in front of the elder. The middle-aged man wore a silver crown on his head. Upon seeing the middle-aged man, the old man hastily said, Lord Ping Yang. The middle-aged man frowned slightly. A human broke through the restrictions we set up. The old man hurriedly nodded. Yes. Ping Yang Lord sized up the old man. You're not his match. The old man's face turned ugly. I'm not her match. Hearing this, Ping Yang Jun's frown deepened. A hint of doubt flashed in his eyes. How is this possible? Even if a human from the lower realm cultivates to the extreme, he would not be able to harm the divine humans. How could a human harm you? The old man said in a deep voice. That's also what I'm curious about, but her sword can indeed kill me. With that said, he looked at Lord Ping Yang. Lord Ping Yang, what should we do now? Lord Ping Yang slowly closed his eyes. I thought that everything was under our control. I didn't expect that some humans had already escaped our control. The old man nodded. That woman is very strong. Lord Ping Yang suddenly said. Where did she go? The old man pointed into the distance. Over there. Lord Ping Yang looked in the direction the old man was pointing, his eyes cold. We can't let this person live. And we can't let her come into contact with the divine human's divine Tao civilization. With that said, he turned his head. Pass down the order to capture this woman. I want her alive. Only a living person has research value. A voice rang out in the dark. Yes, sir. Lord Ping Yang looked into the distance and smiled. I want to see how strong this woman who escaped our restrictions is. However, since she could escape our restrictions, it proves that she's extraordinary. She has high research value. We must capture her alive. With that said, he disappeared on the spot. North Pole Star region. Jingji had also broken through. As for what realm, she did not know. In any case, he had broken through. After Jingji and Shaoan broke through, they could leave the current universe's spacetime at will. However, they did not dare stay in the current universe's spacetime for too long. There was a very scary and mysterious power in the current universe's spacetime. It was the power that Yi Xian had seen. Even now, they were extremely fearful of that mysterious power. Shaoan suddenly said, I can feel that stone door. Jingji said, Me too. The two women could feel that stone door. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. I can't feel it. Shaoan looked at Yi Xian. I'll wait for you. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. That stone gate should be outside the universe. Shaoan nodded. It should be. Yi Xian suddenly looked around and shook his head with a smile. He did not expect that the ancient demons and the very ones would be finished. He was ready to fight to the death. He did not expect that the ancient life and the very one water would come to find his father. What was even more unexpected was that they had actually managed to get his father to come over. They were wiped out. What the hell? Jingji suddenly said. What do you plan to do next? Yi Xian smiled. Of course, I'm going to go outside the current universe to see. But before that, I have to take care of things around me. Jingji nodded. Then I'll wait for you. Yi Xian blinked. Wait for me? Jingji smiled. I feel very safe when I'm with you, young Master Yi. Yi Xian was speechless. Jingji looked at Xiaowen. If you want to fight, I'll be waiting. After that she turned and left. Yi Xian looked at Xiaowen, but Xiaowen did not speak. Yi Xian smiled. Come with me. Xiaowen nodded. Okay. Yi Xian left with Xiaowen. Fan Duo, who was sitting cross-legged in the clouds, suddenly raised her head. At this moment, Yi Xian and Xiaowen appeared in front of her. Fan Duo was about to speak, when she suddenly looked at Xiaowen and frowned. You. Yi Xian smiled. Xiaowen has broken through her limits, and attained the soul realm. Fan Duo's expression instantly changed when she heard this. Really? Xiaowen nodded. Yi Xian looked at Xiaowen. Can you give her some guidance? Xiaowen thought for a moment and said, the reason I was able to break through was because your father forcefully broke through some sort of seal. I don't know exactly what that seal was, but I'm able to sense the seal within her body. But I can't break it. Yi Xian frowned. Seal? Xiaowen nodded. It seems like everyone has it. No. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. You don't seem to have it within you. Yi Xian glanced at his own body. I don't have it within me. Xiaowen nodded slightly. I can't sense it. Yi Xian said solemnly. What kind of seal is it? Xiaowen shook her head. I don't know. I can sense it, but I can't break it. But, at this point, she wanted to say something but hesitated. Yi Xian smiled. Is there something you can't say? Xiaowen said solemnly. I can share my experience with her. But if no one can break the seal within her, then even if she reaches her limits, it will be difficult for her to reach the next level. At most, she can only reach the level of Tai Water. Tai Water. This person hadn't truly attained the soul realm. However, she was able to jump out of this universe for a short period of time. And that was already very terrifying. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then looked at Fan Duo. Then you should learn from Xiaowen first. In the future, I'll ask Qing, or Dad to help you break the seal within you. What do you think? Fan Duo smiled. Thank you. Xiaowen suddenly said. Do you want to try using the Azure Sword? The Azure Sword? Yi Xian frowned. He looked at the Azure Sword in his hand. Can I? Xiaowen said. You can try. Because this sword of yours is very unusual. Yi Xian said solemnly. But I can't sense the seal within her. Xiaowen said. I'll help you. As she spoke, she opened her right hand and pressed it lightly towards Fan Duo. This pressure caused Fan Duo's body to tremble, and then a blurry black mark appeared above her head. Xiaowen looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian drew his sword and slashed. Bang! A ray of sword light slashed the black mark. Under their gazes, the black mark trembled violently before shattering. It really can. All three of them were stunned. Xiaowen looked at Yi Xian. Your sword is amazing. Yi Xian. Fan Duo said solemnly. But I can't sense any changes. Xiaowen said, cultivate with me. It won't take long for us to escape this expanse of space. Fan Duo bowed slightly. Thank you. Xiaowen gazed at Yi Xian. I'll take her to Xiaota. Yi Xian nodded. All right. Suddenly, a woman walked over from afar. Me too. It was Ce. Ce walked over to Yi Xian. Me too. Yi Xian was speechless. A short while later, Ce and Fan Duo entered Xiaota to cultivate. In the field, Yi Xian looked at the Qingxian sword in his hand. Could he create a lot of super powerhouses? The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly when he thought up to this point. After all, he lacked experts the most right now. With the Azure Sword, he could raise the upper limits of countless experts. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot, and he was in Pine Prefecture when he appeared again. After being busy for so long, it was time for him to get down to business. He was getting tired of fighting and killing every single day. It was better to hurry up and give birth to a child. Yi Xian arrived at the imperial palace. Tuoba Yin, who was busy, suddenly raised her head. She was overjoyed when she saw Yi Xian, and she was about to stand up. However, Yi Xian had started to take off his clothes. Tuoba Yin was speechless. Chapter 1849. Without the threat of the ancient demons and the very ones, Yi Xian felt a sense of relief. In the following days, he spent every day and night in the imperial palace, enjoying the indescribable pleasures. Of course, he did not forget to cultivate. His current goal was to rely on his own ability to jump out of this current universe's space-time, not by cheating. In fact, he knew that he was lucky this time. If Tai Yixing Shui and Gu Ming had not gone to find his father, he would still be in a bad situation. After all, He Shaoan and Jingji could not kill Tai Yixing Shui and Gu Ming. Even with the Qingxian sword, his current power was only equivalent to a peak divine soul realm elite. And now, compared to Jingji and Shaoan, the gap was even bigger. His goal now was to reach the divine persona stage. Create a divine persona. Inside Xiaota, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. Under Shaoan's guidance, he began to create a divine persona. Because of Shaoan's guidance, his cultivation was very fast. Shaoan and Zhang Wenxiu also reached the divine physique echelon under Shaoan's guidance. The two women also began to create a divine persona. The reason why the two women could progress so fast was because of Xiaota. 10 years inside was equivalent to 1 day outside. One had to admit that it was too heaven-defying. It should be said that Qing was too heaven-defying. Even Shaoan did not know how Qing did it. And small pagoda itself was even more stupefied. It only knew that it had become stronger. As for how it had become stronger, it did not know. No one knew how Qing did it. In Shaoan's words, the stronger he became, the more terrifying he felt Qing was. Somewhere in an unknown star region, a woman was slowly walking. This woman was the woman in the plain dress. The woman in the plain dress walked slowly, and the space in front of her was very strange, because in some places, the space was folded, and in some places, it was curved. After a few steps, the woman in the plain dress stopped. Not far from her stood a middle-aged man, the god human. The middle-aged man held a folding fan in his hand that emitted streams of light. There was a kind smile on his face, and he looked very wise and refined. The middle-aged man sized up the woman in a simple dress, and said with a smile, "Interesting. I never expected that a human would come here." The woman in the plain dress looked at the middle-aged man, and didn't say anything. The middle-aged man said with smile, "My name is Boya, a great divine master of the god race. I'm not here to hurt you, but because I'm curious. This is because when we created humans, we placed a seal on you. This seal will restrict your growth. And now, it seems that you have broken this seal. How did you do it?" The plainly dressed woman raised her hand and slashed with her sword. Chi! A sword pierced through the middle-aged man's forehead. Boya's expression froze. The plain-dressed woman slowly walked in front of Boya. She stared straight at Boya. "Celestial race? Human?" As she spoke, she shook her head with a trace of disappointment in her eyes. "So you're still thinking about your true form?" Hearing this, Boya's pupils shrank. What do you mean?" The plain-dressed woman looked at Boya. "According to your logic, in my eyes, you belong to a lower race and a lower civilization. Do you understand?" Boya stared at the plain-dressed woman. "You were created by us. What right do you have to say that the celestial race is a lower race?" The plain-dressed woman slowly walked into the distance. Any life form has unlimited possibilities. Humans have spiritual intelligence, so humans have unlimited possibilities. As for saying that the celestial race is a lower race, that's because you're still focusing on other races. Celestial race? Humans? Demons? Beasts? In my eyes, there are no races. Everyone is just a type of life form. Life forms are divided into strong and weak. According to your logic, you're all lower life forms in my eyes. Boya's eyes were somewhat blank. After a while, his pupils shrank. You've already surpassed the essence of life." The plain-dressed woman stopped and turned to look at Boya. "You don't seem so stupid. But you're wrong again." Boya hurriedly asked, "What's wrong?" the plain-dressed woman said. You're wrong because you're too stupid. Boya was speechless. The plain-dressed woman continued walking into the distance. Meanwhile, Boya's body had started to slowly become illusory. Boya suddenly said, then in your opinion, what kind of life form is terrifying? The plain-dressed woman suddenly stopped. She fell silent for a long time before she said, to me, there's nothing to be afraid of because I'm invincible. Boya ridiculed. Invincible? In this world, no one can be truly invincible. Even the ancestor of the celestial race, who created the human race, doesn't dare say that he's invincible. What makes you think that you're invincible? The woman in a simple dress spread open her right hand, and then she spun it lightly. In an instant, the space beneath her palm suddenly started trembling, and then countless mysterious substances converged together. In next to no time, a person had condensed into form under Boya's terrified gaze. It wasn't a human. It was a living celestial god. Moreover, it looked exactly like Boya. Most importantly, it was alive. It wasn't a puppet or some secret technique. Boya stared at the plain-dressed woman, as if he was looking at a ghost. You, the plain-dressed woman said. Is it difficult to create a race of life? It's not difficult. So long as you can understand the essence of life, then creating a life form is a very simple matter. As she spoke, she glanced at Boya. If I want to, I can create a life form that's thousands of times stronger than the celestial race. Boya seemed as if he'd lost his soul. You, the plain-dressed woman waved her right hand lightly, and the person she'd created was directly erased. Creating life forms goes against ethics. I don't recommend it. As she spoke, she slowly closed her eyes. I've spoken too much today. Do you know why I've spoken so much? Because, at this point, she suddenly looked at Boya with an icy cold expression. Because all of you have disappointed me. Why are all of you so weak? So weak that I don't even have the desire to kill all of you. Boya! The plain-dressed woman suddenly opened her palm. There was a small wooden figure in her hand that looked exactly like Yi Xian. Looking at the wooden figure in her hand, the plain-dressed woman smiled. All of you should thank my big brother. Because if it wasn't for him, I would destroy everything I see. Boya's voice trembled. Why? The plain-dressed woman said. Because you're too weak. I find it annoying. As she spoke, she'd already disappeared nearby. She was very indifferent to life, because she'd already surpassed the essence of life. However, she also felt that life was very interesting. Because of Yi Xian. Because of Yi Xian's existence, she felt that life was interesting. Behind the plain-dressed woman, Boya became more and more illusory. His eyes were filled with confusion. The plain-dressed woman had overturned his understanding. In next to no time, Boya vanished on the spot. Completely disappeared. It didn't take long for an old man from the God clan to appear here, and he just stared at the spot where Boya had fallen. He was too late. The old man slowly closed his eyes. He was aware of Boya's strength. However, he didn't expect that the human could even kill Boya and erase him at that. Just how strong was that human woman? At this moment, a celestial race woman suddenly appeared. The woman wore a white robe. Her features were picturesque, and she held an ancient book in her hand. The old man said softly, that human strength is abnormal. The woman said indifferently, I've told you long ago that keeping humans in captivity, in the words of the human race, is like raising a tiger. Now there are people who can jump out of the rules we set. In the future, there will be more and more humans who will jump out of the rules we set. As she spoke, she looked at the old man. Patriarch, we should take advantage of the fact that the human race hasn't completely risen to power. We should directly wipe them out, lest they become a disaster for our celestial race. The old man was the patriarch of the celestial race, Mo Yen. After a long silence, Mo Yen said softly, if we directly wipe them out, our celestial race will lose a lot of faith power. Humans cultivated the cultivation method given to them by the celestial race. However, they didn't know that all cultivators would produce faith power, and this faith power would eventually be fed back to the celestial race. Simply put, it was like humans rearing animals. After reaching a certain level, humans would eat these animals, At this moment, the woman suddenly said, "But as you can see, some humans can already jump out of the rules we set. This means that humans have grown to a certain level. If we allow them to continue to grow, it will become a disaster in the end. If we don't wipe them out while they are still weak, I'm afraid that once they grow in the future, they will become like that woman just now." Hearing this, Mo Yan's face darkened. Even Boya was killed. This meant that the human woman's strength had reached a very terrifying level. She might be just a little weaker than them. Once she came into contact with the celestial race's god civilization, she might become even stronger. Thinking of this, Mo Yan's eyes became cold. He looked at the woman and said, "Yan, I'll leave this matter to you. Wipe out the human race." As Yan had said, someone had already jumped out of the rules they set. This meant that there might be more people jumping out of the rules in the future. Once too many human experts jumped out of the rules, it would be a certain threat to the celestial race. They had to be on guard. Ian smiled and said, "All right, but how do you plan to deal with that woman?" Mo Yan looked into the distance. After looking for a long time, he said, "I can't feel her aura anymore. She must have used some special method to hide herself." Saying this, he turned to the side and said, "Search for this person with all your strength. If you find her, don't kill her. I want her alive." At the side, a voice sounded quietly. "Understood." Chapter 1850. After Yi Yin left the God clan, she arrived at an unknown galaxy. She'd just arrived when an old man suddenly appeared in front of her. The old man bowed respectfully. "Greetings, God." Yi Yin spoke indifferently. "Annihilate the humans." "Annihilate the humans?" The old man was stunned. Yi Yin smiled. "Didn't you hear me?" The old man hurriedly said, "I heard." "God of Yi Yin, may I ask why you suddenly want to annihilate the humans?" Yi Yin walked over to the old man and stared at him. "Don't ask so many questions. Gather everyone here right now." The old man was shocked, and he didn't dare ask any further questions. He bowed respectfully before turning around and leaving. It didn't take long for a few dozen human experts to appear in front of Yi Yin. These humans had been raised by the God clan to manage the humans. The Divine Gate, using humans to manage humans. At this moment, all the human experts of the Divine Gate were gathered in front of Yi Yin, and all of them were extremely respectful. Yi Yin glanced at them and said, "The God clan has decided to annihilate all humans. Of course, all of you are excluded, because all of you have been loyal to the God clan, and we won't abandon all of you. I'll leave the task of annihilating the humans to all of you. Once it's done, all of you will follow me back to the God clan, and come into contact with an even more powerful civilization." Annihilate the humans? All the human experts in the surroundings were stunned. Why are we suddenly annihilating the humans? Yi Yin glanced at them again and smiled. "Is there a problem?" One of the human experts bowed respectfully. "My God, why are we suddenly annihilating?" Yi Yin suddenly waved her right hand. Bang! The human expert who'd spoken was instantly obliterated. The remaining human experts were horrified when they witnessed this scene. Yi Yin smiled. "Do whatever I tell you to do. Don't ask why. Understand?" The other human experts hurriedly replied, "Yes." Yi Yin said, "You can begin now. As for how to annihilate all the humans in the universe, think about it yourselves. I'll return in a month. I hope all humans will be completely annihilated by then." She turned around and left once she finished speaking. The human experts glanced at each other. Meanwhile, one of them suddenly looked at the old man who led the group. "Elder Zhang, why did the God clan suddenly annihilate the humans?" Elder Zhang shook his head. "I don't know." The man frowned. "Even Elder Zhang doesn't know?" Elder Zhang said softly. "Do you still remember the swordsman who forced us to cast a soul for a human woman?" Everyone nodded. They had a deep impression of that swordsman. That day, he broke through the stone door with a single sword strike and almost killed Elder Zhang. A complicated look flashed in Elder Zhang's eyes. Among the humans, there are some who have broken the rules set by the Divine Clan. Because of this, the Divine Clan feels a little uneasy. Therefore, they want to destroy the humans they created. Some of the human powerhouses were puzzled. How did the green-robed swordsman escape their rules? Everyone looked at Elder Zhang. This was also what they were very confused about. Old Zhang shook his head. But what was certain was that someone had already jumped out. And if one person jumped out, it meant that many people could also jump out. So the divine humans can't sit still anymore. A human powerhouse said in a deep voice, Elder Zhang, do we really want to destroy the humans? Elder Zhang said indifferently, if we don't destroy the humans, the divine clan will destroy us. Everyone was silent. Rebel against the divine clan? That was simply impossible. In front of the divine clan, they were just like ants. Thinking of this, the human powerhouses sighed in their hearts. After cultivating for so many years, they also wanted to jump out of that circle. But no one could do it. Even Elder Zhang and Yi couldn't completely jump out. And they could reach this point today, because of the divine clan's permission. Otherwise, they would at most be at the divine soul realm. They relied on the divine clan to survive. At this time, Elder Zhang suddenly said, destroy the rest of the humans. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. The powerhouses were silent. Obviously they agreed. In fact, they had no other choice. Either destroy the humans, or be destroyed by the divine clan. Elder Zhang suddenly said, let's go. With that, he turned and left. Everyone else followed closely behind. Inside Xiaota's room. At this moment, Yi Xian was still forming his divine core. Because of Xiaoen's guidance, everything was going smoothly. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. At this moment, his body was undergoing a subtle change. Divine core. At this moment he was condensing his divine core. Once his divine core was formed, his strength would undergo a tremendous change. Most importantly, he might be able to open the sword Dao seal left behind by his father and big brother. That was the main point. 3 years later, Yi Xian, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, suddenly opened his eyes. Bang! A powerful aura swept out from his body, and the space around him boiled. Yi Xian pressed down lightly with his right hand, and the powerful aura instantly vanished without a trace. At the side, Xiaoen sized up Yi Xian and said, it's done. Yi Xian nodded. After years of bitter cultivation, he had finally condensed his divine core. At this moment his body trembled slightly, and a sword howl resounded. Yi Xian was overjoyed. The sword Dao seal had been activated. Yi Xian first looked at the sword Dao seal left behind by his father. Just as he expected, this seal was the second part of the sword domain. The second part was called Core Sword Domain. It was also called Core Sword Domain. It could crush everything in Core Sword Domain. Main attack. When he arrived at another unknown space-time, his face instantly darkened. This unknown space-time was filled with endless dead spirits' chi. And the dead spirits' chi in the current universe had seeped through this space-time. Meanwhile, Xiaoen and Jingji appeared by his side. Their faces sank when they saw the dead spirits' chi in this space-time. Someone really wants to destroy the current universe. Who is it? Jingji looked at Yi Xian. What should we do? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, of course we have to stop it. If they didn't stop it, then the dead spirits' chi wouldn't just destroy Azure Prefecture. It would also destroy the 5th dimension and the 9th dimension. It was coming for this universe. Jingji suddenly said, we have to deal with the dead spirit's chi at its source. Otherwise it will be endless. Yi Xian looked up into the depths of the starry sky. Can't both of you sense that stone door? Jingji nodded. Yi Xian said, can you make it come out? Jingji was about to speak when a huge vortex suddenly appeared in the depths of the starry sky, and then a stone door slowly condensed. At the same time, an old man walked out from the stone door. This old man was Elder Zhang. Elder Zhang looked down at Yi Xian and the others and didn't speak. Jingji suddenly said, you want to destroy that universe? Elder Zhang said indifferently, yes. Jingji was slightly puzzled. Why? Elder Zhang said, there's no need to explain to you. Jingji's face sank when she heard this, and she looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, there has to be a reason to destroy a universe, right? A reason? Elder Zhang looked at Yi Xian. Humans are weak, so they deserve to die. Is this reason enough? Yi Xian frowned when he heard this. Elder Zhang said, "Don't struggle pointlessly. This is the fate of all humans." As he spoke, his body gradually became illusory. At the same time, countless specks of necromancy energy started to spread out towards the universe outside. Yi Xian's expression became ferocious when he saw this. At this moment he thought of something. Something that happened when he was young with Qing. Why did he die in that cave all those years ago? It was because Tendo wanted to destroy the world. But why did Tendo want to destroy the world? Because all living beings were like ants in the eyes of Tendo. If you're weak, then who else should I bully? Being weak is wrong. And being weak is a sin. Just like at this moment, these people want to destroy the entire human race. And the reason is that humans are weak, so they deserve to die. How unfair is this world? When he thought of this, Yi Xian was stunned. At this moment, he seemed to see the helpless and despairing gazes of countless people. Just like how he and Qing looked in that cave all those years ago. His heart. What was his heart all those years ago? He wanted Qing to become stronger, then kill Tendo and help the weak. Because he and Qing used to be very weak. If someone had stood up against Tendo back then, he and Qing would not have ended up like that. But now he only thought of himself, his family and friends. Was he wrong? He was not wrong. He really did not have the obligation to save the world. He could bring all his family and friends into Xiaotao's body, and then let the universe be destroyed. But if that was the case, how many people would be as helpless and despairing as he and Qing had been in the past? Back then he and Qing had hoped so much that someone would stand up against Tendo. But there was no one. When he thought of this, Yi Xian took a step forward and directly displayed his sword domain. With the help of the Qingxian sword, his sword domain directly enveloped this unknown space-time, and the necromancy energy was temporarily suppressed by his sword domain. Almost instantly, his face turned as pale as a sheet. Protect. Invincible sword domain. He did not know if he could save this current universe, but he only wanted to help this current universe and fight for this current universe with countless living beings. End of this chapter. Chapter 1851. The sword domain enveloped this unknown expanse of space and suppressed the necro energy. However, there was truly too much of it. It wasn't something he could endure right now. He would be dead by now if it wasn't for the green profound sword. The might of the green profound sword had sustained his sword domain and soul. Elder Zhang's eyes narrowed, and he was quite shocked. He hadn't expected that the young man before him would actually be able to suppress the necro energy. As far as he was concerned, it was utterly impossible. As if he'd thought of something, he suddenly gazed at the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand. When he saw the azure profound sword, his brows furrowed. This sword made him feel somewhat uneasy. Meanwhile, an old man appeared in front of Elder Zhang, and he gazed at Yi Xian. Elder Zhang, this young man isn't simple at all. Elder Zhang nodded. That sword in his hand is even more extraordinary. The old man spoke in a low voice. He can't be allowed to suppress the necro energy. Elder Zhang nodded, and then he slowly pressed his right hand down, causing a powerful force to sweep towards Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Shaoan suddenly appeared above Yi Xian, and then she raised her hands. In an instant, a golden shield appeared above her. Rumble! The golden round shield trembled violently, and then it cracked. Shaoan plummeted straight down. Elder Zhang gazed at Shaoan. It's you! He naturally recognized Shaoan because it was they who'd helped her refine her radiant soul. Shaoan wiped off the blood on the corner of her mouth, and then she looked up at Elder Zhang. Elder Zhang spoke in a low voice. Young miss, if you're willing, then you can join my divine door. If you're willing, then you can be spared from death. Shaoan had the qualifications to join the divine door. Moreover, the mysterious green-clothed swordsman was standing behind Shaoan, and that was something he was quite fearful of. Shaoan shook her head when she heard Elder Zhang, and then she glanced at Yi Xian. I'll go with him. Go with him. Hearing this, Elder Zhang furrowed his brows. Going against the God clan will only lead to death. Shaoan replied, It's fine. Elder Zhang shook his head. Kill him. Even though he was afraid of the man in green, he was even more afraid of the god tribe. Compared to the god race, the green-robed man was just a slightly stronger human. What was he worth? Hearing Old Man Zhang's words, a few super experts suddenly flew out from the stone door and headed straight for Xiaowen. Xiaowen looked at the super experts charging at her with a calm expression. She slowly clenched her right hand, and in the next moment, she suddenly turned into a beam of golden light and shot into the sky. Rumble! As the golden light shattered, Xiaowen fell straight from the sky. In front of the stone door, Old Zhang looked at the falling Xiaowen and said indifferently, "You have only just reached the bright soul stage. You are not our match. I will now give you one last chance. If you are willing to enter my divine gate, I can spare your life." Down below, Xiaowen wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. Her body had already split open. His injuries were severe. Xiaowen shook his head. Again. She was about to launch another attack. However, at this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, "Wait." Xiaowen looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian grinned. His smile was slightly pale. "I want to protect this universe. How can I drag you down?" Xiaowen looked at Yi Xian. "You protect this universe, and I will protect you." Yi Xian was stunned, and then he smiled. "We both have to live well." Live. In the sky, Elder Zhang suddenly spoke indifferently. "Young man, you are indeed extraordinary to be able to utilize the sword domain to suppress the necromancy energy. But do you know what you are facing? You won't know." Yi Xian suddenly looked at Xiaowen and smiled. "They all say that I am the second generation." "Xiaowen, this chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page." Xiaowen replied with a question. "Aren't you?" Yi Xian's face darkened. "Give me some face." Xiaowen nodded. "I take back what I said." Yi Xian was speechless. In front of the stone door, Elder Zhang looked at Yi Xian. "It sounds like you are going to call for help." Yi Xian smiled. "Of course." As he spoke, he gazed at the green profound sword in his hand and spoke softly. "Qing I want to save this universe. Help me." Yi Xian wasn't a pedantic person. Save the universe? He wanted to, but he didn't have the ability. Since he didn't have the ability, he naturally wouldn't force it. Moreover, he would even bring his woman along. He wasn't an idiot. In the sky, Elder Zhang looked at Yi Xian. "I'll be waiting." In an unknown star region, a woman in a plain dress suddenly stopped. She fell silent for a moment before she said, "All right." As she spoke, she pressed her fingers together. The green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly shot into the sky. Qi. In an instant, the dead spirit's aura around Yi Xian was cut into pieces by the green profound sword. With one strike, all the dead spirit's aura was gone. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Qing could really hear him? In fact, he was just testing it out. He didn't expect Qing could really hear him. Qing had been watching him all this time. Thinking of this, Yi Xian felt a warm current in his heart. In the sky, Elder Zhang and the others were completely dumbfounded. Gone? With one strike, all the dead spirit's aura was gone? As if thinking of something, Elder Zhang looked at Yi Xian and stared at Yi Xian. "Who the hell are you?" Yi Xian looked at Elder Zhang. "The divine race's ancestor." "Bullshit," Elder Zhang said angrily. "You're a human. How can you be the divine race's ancestor? Who are you trying to fool?" Yi Xian said indifferently. "Then who do you think I am?" Mr. Zhang stared at Yi Xian. At this moment he was panicking. That strike just now was not from Yi Xian. It was from someone secretly controlling it. But he couldn't feel anything. What did this mean? It meant that the person who did it was far stronger than him. Was it a human or a divine race? Or the green-robed man? The green-robed man. At this thought, Elder Zhang was sure. Only that human man had this kind of strength. Elder Zhang looked around, his eyes filled with fear. That day, his soul was almost destroyed by the green-robed man. Elder Zhang looked coldly at Yi Xian. "Let's go." Then he and the others turned and entered the stone door. The stone door closed. Below, Yi Xian looked at the green profound sword. At this moment, the green profound sword trembled slightly and landed in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian held the green profound sword in silence. In another unknown starfield, the woman in a plain dress continued walking into the distance. Save the universe? She really had no interest in that. Perhaps in the beginning she might have, but she didn't. The reason she did it was because of Yi Xian. Similarly, if Yi Xian needed it, he could just say the word, and she would destroy the entire universe. To her, life was just a formality, a dispensable formality. Of course, except for Yi Xian. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. At this moment, the woman in the plain dress suddenly stopped. She looked into the distance and saw a woman standing there. When the woman saw the woman in a plain dress, she was slightly stunned. And then she smiled. What a coincidence! The woman in a plain dress nodded slightly as a greeting. The woman in front of her was none other than Mu Yinyan. Mu Yinyan smiled. I snuck up here. But you probably forced your way up here, right? The woman in a plain dress nodded. Mu Yinyan said, How is he? The woman in a plain dress gazed at Mu Yinyan. I'm a little busy. Obviously, she didn't want to talk anymore. If it wasn't for Mu Yinyan, she wouldn't have said a word. She would still give Mu Yinyan some face. Mu Yinyan smiled. I won't disturb you anymore. The woman in a plain dress nodded slightly, and then she walked off into the distance. But she stopped after a few steps. And then she said, You probably want to ask me something. Go ahead. Mu Yinyan said, The God race created humans. In other words, they've grasped the essence of life, right? The woman in a plain dress nodded. Yes. Mu Yinyan spoke in a low voice. I've been researching the essence of life recently, but I've noticed some problems. The essence of life is made up of matter. But where does that matter come from? In other words, what was the beginning of life? For example, the first living thing. The origin of life. That was what she'd been researching recently. Chapter 1852. The God Clan. In the middle of a starfield, there was a tower that was thousands of feet tall. The Tower of Gods. The Tower of Gods had a total of 1,000 levels, and every single level represented a world. Just this single pagoda contained over 1,000 worlds within it. Moreover, there were countless spatial passageways around the pagoda. An endless energy of faith and pure spirit energy flowed ceaselessly through these spatial passageways into the various levels of the pagoda. The top-rate experts of the God Clan were gathered within a hall. Mo Yen, who sat at the seat of the host, glanced at them. And then he said, I know that two of them have broken through the rules we set. The first is that woman in a plain dress. She killed Boya. And it proves that her strength has exceeded the limits of humans, and even surpassed some of our gods. The second is that man in green clothes. His strength is unknown, but he shouldn't be too weak. Hearing this, all the gods in the hall furrowed their brows. Humans were created by the gods. Every single human had a seal placed on them since birth. It wasn't just humans, even the entire universe had a seal and restriction. Without the help of the God Clan, the soul realm was the limit of humans. Yet now, someone had actually broken through this limit without relying on the God Clan. Suddenly a woman smiled and said, I think it might not be a bad thing. All the gods gazed at her when they heard this. The person who spoke was Yanji, and he was a grand instructor of the God Clan's God Institute. Yanji smiled. I know what all of you are worried about. But have all of you thought about why they were able to break through the rules we set? All the gods frowned when they heard this. Right. Why were they able to break through the rules we set? That's not normal. Yanji continued. Since they were able to break through our rules, it means that they've grasped another path of cultivation. A path that even we don't know about. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly as she spoke. So, as far as I'm concerned, it isn't a bad thing. And it's actually a good thing. It's an extremely good thing, because it means that we might be able to establish a new path of cultivation. Mo Yen said. Both of them really do possess extremely high research value. Yanji hurriedly said. Patriarch, they must be kept alive. Only when they're alive would they have research value. Mo Yen was about to speak when an extremely old man spoke abruptly. I'm slightly uneasy. Hearing this, everyone looked at the old man. This elder's name was Yen Zhu, and he was the great elder of the divine human race. Mo Yin smiled and said, Elder Yanju, please speak. Yanju said, At present, I don't even know the specific situation of these two people. Their strength is also just our conjecture. Has anyone thought about what if their strength is different from what we have guessed, or even much stronger than what we have guessed? Yanji smiled and said, What Grand Elder means is that those two humans are stronger than all of us here. Yanju looked at Yanji. Why isn't it possible? Nothing is absolute. Yanji shook his head and smiled. Great Elder, how long has human history been around? How long is the history of the divine human race? Furthermore, humans were created by us. In the food chain of this universe, they belong to the lower races. It's not that I'm looking down on them, but they're just that weak. Even if there are one or two exceptions, they're just slightly stronger ants. The experts of the divine clan nodded in agreement when they heard this. It wasn't that they looked down on the two of them, but in their opinion, it was impossible for a human to stand shoulder to shoulder with the divine race. After all, humans were created by the divine race. Humans surpassing the divine race? All the experts felt it was absurd when they thought up to this point. How could a human that was created by the divine race surpass the divine race? Yanju fell silent. Actually, he didn't think that humans could surpass the divine race. But reason told him that nothing was absolute, and he shouldn't look down on them. Meanwhile, Mo Yin suddenly said, Instructor Yanji is right. Those two do have extremely high research value, so we should capture them alive. However, what Grand Elder said isn't without reason. We can't be careless and underestimate them. Since they were able to escape the rules we set, then they're definitely extraordinary. Moreover, all of you are aware of Boya's strength. Since that woman was able to kill him, it means that her strength has reached at least the 6th rank. The division of realms in the divine domain was different from humans. There were a total of 9 ranks. 9 was the current limit. Even in the divine clan, there were only a few 9th rank experts. Yanji suddenly said, Since that woman has reached the 6th rank, it means that humans can break through their limits and reach the level of our divine clan. Therefore, I think it's time to exterminate them. Moreover, their power of faith is dispensable to us now. After all, we have a new substitute. All the experts nodded when they heard this. In fact, in the last 1,000,000 years, the divine clan didn't care about humans anymore. This was because the god race had already found a new substitute. To the divine race, the power of faith of the human race was really dispensable. Mo Yin suddenly looked at Yi Yen. Tell the humans in the gate of God to hurry up. As for the man in green and the woman in the plain dress, our divine clan will deal with them. Yi Yen nodded. I'll arrange it. Mo Yin nodded slightly. The matter with the humans below isn't urgent. Our top priority is to capture the swordsman and the woman in the plain dress. As he spoke, he turned to look at a middle-aged man. Yu Chun, I'll leave the task of capturing them to you. No problem, right? The middle-aged man called Yu Chun nodded slightly. No problem. Mo Yin said. To prevent any unforeseen circumstances, I'll allow you to mobilize 6 divine generals. Yu Chun said indifferently. No need. They're just 2 humans. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Mo Yin shook his head. This fellow is still so arrogant. Meanwhile, Yanji spoke abruptly. I want to make a trip to the human universe. Mo Yin looked at Yanji. The human universe? Yanji nodded and smiled. I wasn't interested in them in the past, but now I am. I want to take a few students to the human universe and come into contact with them. Mo Yin thought for a moment and nodded. Up to you. Yanji turned around and left. It didn't take long for all the experts to disperse. Not long after, Yanji brought the 3 god race students to the human universe. But at this moment they were in human form. Somewhere in the starry sky, Yanji looked down and smiled. I've studied humans in the past. As lowly beings, although they're weak, they're very interesting, because they possess a so-called human nature. A woman in a white dress by Yanji's side was slightly curious. Instructor Yanji, what is human nature? Yanji smiled. Qin Shui, you're making things difficult for me. Because human nature is the most complicated thing about humans, and it can't be explained in a few words. A man by the side said indifferently, "Instructor, what's there to study about these ants?" Yenji glanced at the man and smiled. Although humans are weak, they still have some outstanding aspects. Let's go." With that, she vanished with the two of them. Inside the Xiaota, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground with the azure profound sword in front of him, and around him, there was an extremely terrifying power. Sword domain. Sword domain just now. During this period of time, he had been madly cultivating the square sword domain, using the azure profound sword to establish a sword domain. It could destroy everything in the square sword. After the dead spirit chi from before, the current universe was in a state of panic. Although the previous destruction of the world didn't succeed, many people died. Now the current universe was in a mess. The main reason was that the people's hearts were in chaos. The order of the entire universe collapsed, and the evil side of human nature was completely exposed. At this moment, Jingji suddenly appeared in Yi Xian's Xiaota. When he saw the power of the sword domain around Yi Xian, Jingji's expression instantly became incomparably solemn. At this moment, Yi Xian gave him a very dangerous feeling. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked at Jingji. "What's wrong?" Jingji said in a deep voice, "The current universe is very chaotic, and many places have lost their original order. Moreover, there are rumors that the end of the world is coming, and the universe is going to be destroyed." Hearing this, Yi Xian frowned. Jingji looked at Yi Xian. "Are you going to do something about it?" She knew that in this universe, only Yi Xian had the strength to do something about it. If Yi Xian didn't do anything, then humans wouldn't even need to wait for the god race to act, as humans would play themselves to death. Most of the time, humans were very united, but most of the time, humans were the most ferocious when they killed each other. Yi Xian shook his head. "The universe is too big. How can I do anything about it?" How big was the current universe? Manage the entire universe? Even if he wanted to, he didn't have the ability. He didn't have enough manpower. Jingji said in a deep voice. "Now there are rumors that the universe is going to end. Many people think that since they are going to die anyway, why not go crazy? Therefore, many places outside, especially those small places, are in chaos." Yi Xian looked at Jingji. "What do you think?" Jingji knew. "If you want to do something, I have a way. If you don't want to do something, then you can only let the chaos outside." Yi Xian didn't say anything. Jingji said again, "I think you have to do something." Yi Xian asked, "Why?" Jingji looked at Yi Xian. "Now is not a problem of human civil strife, but a war between races. The god race wants to destroy us. But now, humans need someone to carry the flag. If no one comes out to carry this flag, the entire human race will be at a loss. As for us humans, we can only let the god race slaughter us. This is the end of humanity. If you want to save the human race, you must stand up and carry the flag. Call on all humans to fight against the divine race." Yi Xian shook his head. "I know you're right, but the humans' current strength is not enough to fight against the god clan." Jingji frowned slightly. "Why can't we fight against the god race? We have a green-robed man and a plain-dressed woman. I know that you don't want to rely on your father or your sister, but what is the purpose of the god race? Exterminate the entire human race? And they are humans, right?" As she said that, she looked at Yi Xian and said seriously, "I can testify for you. It was the god-human race that didn't care about martial ethics first. Don't have any other psychological burden. Fight them first. If you can't beat them, make yourself look worse. It's best if you break an arm or a leg. Then, I'll take your severed limbs to inform your father and sister. The effect will definitely be great." Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1853. Jingji knew that the plain-dressed woman and the green-robed man might not care about this current universe, but they would definitely care about Yi Xian. If they saw Yi Xian crippled, the two of them would definitely not stand by and do nothing, especially the woman in the plain dress. At the thought of the woman in the plain dress seeing Yi Xian's severed limbs, she felt very excited. That woman must have slaughtered the entire divine race. Upon hearing Jingji's words, Yi Xian was somewhat speechless. Damn it! This woman was not only scheming against him, but she was also scheming against his father and Qing'er. Too evil. At this moment, Jingji suddenly sighed in a low voice. Come with me to take a look outside. Without waiting for Yi Xian to refuse, she directly grabbed Yi Xian's arm and left Xiaota. The two of them immediately appeared in the divine ancient star field. Under Jingji's lead, the two of them came to a small city. As soon as they entered the city, Yi Xian furrowed his brows. Inside the city, there were endless screams. Yi Xian glanced around. At this moment, the entire city was in chaos. Burning, killing, raping. The whole city was like hell on earth. As for those weaklings without strength, it was even more tragic to look at. The dark side of human nature was on full display. Beside Yi Xian, Jingji said softly, there are many places like this in the universe. Some powerful people and powerful forces could protect themselves. But who would care about those weaker people? They can only wait to be slaughtered. Yi Xian said nothing. Jing knew. Why did you suppress the dead spirit qi all by yourself? In fact, she was very curious about this point. Based on her understanding of Yi Xian was not a saint, and Yi Xian was not the kind of person who wanted to be a hero. However, at that time, Yi Xian still stood out. Yi Xian said softly, because I thought of me and Qing'er. At that time, she and I were helpless. Jingji looked into the distance and said, what you were in the past is what they are now. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. We cannot avoid a battle with the God clan. Yi Xian smiled and said, indeed. As he spoke, he opened his palm, and Xiaota appeared within it. In the next moment, all the experts of the Sword Alliance appeared here. Yi Xian looked at the leading sword Ju. From now on, the order of this universe will be maintained by my Sword Alliance. First, send an order to all the realms. Everyone must obey the order set by the Sword Alliance. Anyone who dares to cause trouble will be killed. Sword Ju glanced at Yi Xian. We might not have enough manpower. Yi Xian said, ask the All Heavens City and the Undying Emperor clan of the nine-dimensional cosmos for help. Then he looked at Xiaota, Supreme Fan Duo and Supreme Feng Yi. The two women appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the two women. I need your help. But the divine race annihilating the human race, young Master Yi said that it is cruel and inhumane. Saying that, she shook her head and smiled. Young Master Yi, double standard is not good. Yi Xian smiled. It's a matter of strength. Yanji smiled and said, Mr. Yi hit the mark. Actually, we don't need to talk about benevolence and morality. In the end, it's a matter of strength. The reason why humans can raise livestock to eat and enslave other living beings is because humans are strong. As for the reason why the divine race wants to annihilate the human race, that's not important. What's important is that the divine race is stronger than humans. What do you think? Yi Xian smiled slightly. Indeed, if we fall behind, we will be beaten. Humans are weak now, so it's normal for them to be beaten. I'm very open about this. A trace of astonishment flashed across Yanji and Yanji's eyes. I originally thought that young Master Yi still wanted to talk about benevolence and morality with me. Yi Xian laughed. Miss Yanji, I'm a little curious. Why do you think the divine race suddenly wants to annihilate the human race? Jingji also looked at Yanji. She was also very curious. Why did the divine race suddenly want to annihilate the human race? Something must have happened. Yanji blinked and smiled. Young Master Yi, I'm not from the divine race. So how would I know why they want to annihilate the human race? Yi Xian smiled. That's true. Yanji looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. Young Master Yi, can I take a look at this sword? Just take a look. Yi Xian handed the sword to Yanji. Yanji took the sword, and very quickly, the smile on her face gradually disappeared and was replaced with solemnity. A moment later, Yanji looked at Yi Xian. Who made this sword? Yi Xian smiled. I made it myself. Yanji was stunned, then said, Young Master Yi, do I look like an idiot to you? Yi Xian. Yanji looked at the green profound sword again. A moment later, she said in a deep voice, "Young Master Yi, the person who made this sword is not simple." As she said that, she glanced at Yi Xian. At this moment, a trace of uneasiness suddenly rose in her heart, because she couldn't completely see through this sword. Some of the knowledge contained in this sword was something she had never come into contact with before. If it was really made by a human, then this human was too terrifying. Yi Xian suddenly said with a smile, "I brought them from the god-human clan." Yanji frowned slightly. "Really?" Yi Xian nodded. "It was really made by the divine race." Yanji stared at Yi Xian in silence. If it was really made by the divine race, then it made sense. However, she still didn't believe it. Yi Xian suddenly said, "I can swear on my character that it's not a lie." "Swear on my character?" Yanji hesitated for a moment, then said, "That's too serious. I believe in young Master Ye's words." She had studied humans before, so she knew that humans paid great attention to character. Since this human in front of her had sworn on his character, then it should be true. Chapter 1854. Made by the Celestial Race? Yanji fell into deep thought. If it was made by the Celestial Race, then it meant that someone from the Celestial Race had come down to help the humans. And it wasn't an ordinary person. Who was it? For a time, countless Celestial Race experts flashed through Yanji's mind. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and the cyan profound sword appeared in his hand. He smiled and said, "Miss Yanji, I still have something to do, farewell." After saying that, he turned and left. Yanji glanced at Yi Xian, who was leaving in the distance, and kept silent. At this moment, Qin Shui suddenly said, "Mentor, do you really believe that the sword was made by the Celestial Race?" Yanji said solemnly, "This sword's mysteries are endless. The Tao of time and space contained within is far beyond this universe. Not only that, even I can't see through some of it. This sword shouldn't have been made by humans." Qin Shui frowned slightly. "Then who could it be?" Yanji said softly, "I don't know, but it's definitely not an ordinary celestial race. But what is the other party's intention? To support the humans?" As she said that, she frowned. Qin Shui suddenly asked, "Mentor, could it be that Yi Xian is lying?" Yanji said, "It shouldn't be, right? That person swore on his character. Moreover, that sword is definitely not made by humans." Qin Shui said solemnly, "Then what should we do now?" Yanji said, "You return to the celestial race first, and inform the patriarch of this matter. I'll stay here and observe." Qin Shui nodded. "Okay." After saying that, she turned and disappeared into the horizon. Yanji looked into the distance and disappeared on the spot. On the other side, Jingji looked at Yi Xian. "They are from the celestial race." Yi Xian nodded. Jingji said solemnly, "Why not kill them?" Yi Xian smiled. "Is there any use in killing them?" Jingji said, "That's true." Yi Xian looked around and said, "Unknowingly I, Yi Xian, have become the flag bearer of the human race." As he said that, he shook his head and smiled. "It's like a dream. Do you regret it?" Jingji asked with a smile. Yi Xian shook his head. "As you said, we will have to fight the god race eventually, right?" Jingji looked up into the depths of the starry sky. "Do you know? In the past, we always wanted to leave this current universe and see the universe outside. However, when we were finally able to leave this place, we discovered that the outside world was filled with malicious intent towards us. Curious. Most of the time, human curiosity could kill humans." Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, a giant stone gate suddenly appeared above their heads. The divine gate. The stone door opened slowly, and a terrifying pressure swept down. Then an old man walked out. Old Zhang. After Elder Zhang appeared, he looked at Yi Xian and said, "You can't protect humanity." Yi Xian smiled and said, "You seem to be a human too." Elder Zhang said, "I'm different from you." Yi Xian was puzzled. "What's different?" Old Zhang said, "I can become a god. After the humans are annihilated, the members of the divine gate will head to the god domain. There, we can accept a divine Tao civilization. a civilization that far surpasses humanity. God domain. Yi Xian frowned. At this moment, Elder Zhang suddenly said, I originally wanted to give all humans a peaceful death, but since you're the patriarch, then don't blame us for being inhumane. As soon as he finished speaking, the surrounding space suddenly trembled. In the next moment, the space around them started to crack, and then the space around them started to burn. It should be said that the entire universe started to burn. Seeing this, Yi Xian said solemnly, there should be an array formation enveloping our current universe. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to destroy this universe at will. Jingji nodded. It should be. Yi Xian looked at the stone door. It's behind that stone door. Jingji was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword. A ray of sword light shot into the sky and slashed at Elder Zhang, who was in front of the stone door. When he saw Yi Xian charging over with his sword in hand, Elder Zhang slowly pressed his right hand down, and then an enormous palm descended from the sky. Rumble! The space above Yi Xian instantly became illusory. Yi Xian suddenly roared furiously, slash! Bang! The sword light directly slashed the palm print. In an instant, the palm print was directly shattered, turning into countless streams of light that shot out. At the same time, Yi Xian, who was holding the sword, had already rushed in front of Mr. Zhang. He slashed his sword down. Elder Zhang was just about to attack when his expression changed drastically, because a mysterious force had enveloped him. Sword domain. That was the sword domain from before. At the instant that Yi Xian's sword descended, an expanse of light instantly enveloped him and Elder Zhang. Just now, everything had been destroyed. Bang! An explosion resounded, and then a soul suddenly flew out from within the expanse of light. It was Elder Zhang. In that instant just now, his body had been blasted into pieces. Even though his soul had escaped, it was almost translucent as well. A single sword strike had almost obliterated him. Elder Zhang looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. You! At this moment, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly flew out. Elder Zhang didn't even have time to react before the soul-subduing sword pierced through his forehead. Bang! Elder Zhang's soul was directly absorbed. After absorbing Elder Zhang's soul, the azure profound sword trembled slightly. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the azure profound sword returned to his hand. At this moment his face was slightly pale. Executing the core sword domain consumed too much energy. In fact, he hadn't fully grasped the core sword domain. He'd grasped 80% of it at most. Because the core sword domain relied entirely on his own comprehension. If it wasn't for the azure profound sword, even if he executed the core sword domain, it would be difficult for him to kill Elder Zhang. Elder Zhang's strength was extraordinarily terrifying. In the dark, Yanji took a deep look at Yi Xian. She hadn't expected that Yi Xian would actually be able to kill Elder Zhang with a single sword strike. After all, Elder Zhang's cultivation far surpassed Yi Xian's. Yanji gazed at the azure profound sword in Yi Xian's hand. A large part of the reason Yi Xian was able to surmount his realm and kill Elder Zhang was because of the sword domain and the sword he'd just executed. She was even more curious about the sword. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly walked towards the stone door. Meanwhile, a group of experts suddenly surged out from within the stone door. All of them were extraordinary experts from the divine door. Yi Xian's face fell when he witnessed this scene. There were quite a few of them. Meanwhile, Shaoan and Jingji appeared by Yi Xian's side. At the same time, there was a white-haired old man. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw the white-haired old man. He'd seen this person in the past. It was the old man that played chess with Qing. Why is he here? Yi Xian gazed at the old man, and the old man smiled embarrassedly. Young Master Yi. Yi Xian smiled. What are you doing here, senior? The old man replied. I heard young Master Yi was calling for me, so how could I not come? Yi Xian was just about to speak when the old man continued. After parting ways with senior that day, I gained some comprehension after returning. I never expected that I'd advance a step further. Yi Xian sized up the old man. The old man really was much stronger than before. This old man is amazing. He actually improved after being beaten up by Qing. The white-haired old man gazed at the experts from the divine door in the distance and spoke solemnly. Young Master Yi, these people aren't simple. Yi Xian nodded. They're from the Godsfolk clan, and they intend to destroy our universe and all humans. The white-haired old man frowned. Do they really intend to destroy all humans? Yi Xian nodded. The white-haired old man's face fell. An even more powerful clan? Yi Xian nodded. I've never heard of the Godsfolk clan before, but from the looks of it now, they're definitely stronger than humans. The white-haired old man's eyes were filled with worry. He seemed to have thought of something and looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, is your sister a human? Yi Xian nodded. Of course Qing is a human. Why do you ask, senior? The white-haired old man laughed. She's a human. If she's a human, then I won't panic. He was afraid that the woman in the plain dress was from the Godsfolk clan. If that's the case, then what's the point of fighting? Just surrender. But since the woman in the plain dress is a human, then what's there to be afraid of? Chapter 1855. Seeing the green profound sword in his hand tremble, Yi Xian hurriedly said, Qing hum. A sword hum suddenly resounded. Then the green profound sword suddenly flew up. Qi. A ray of sword light directly pierced the old man's forehead. At the same time, the heads of the remaining Gate of God experts flew out. More than 30 bloody heads flew out at the same time. It was an extremely bloody scene. The old man who was pierced by the sword light was stunned. How did I die? He and the surrounding Gate of God experts were killed before they could even react. The old man's eyes were somewhat blank. Didn't the divine human race want to stop the people behind Yi Xian? Where are the divine human race? In the dark, Yinji's expression instantly became solemn. Who is it? She couldn't sense it at all. Even with her strength, she couldn't sense the person who attacked. At this moment, Yinji's pupils suddenly shrank because the green profound sword suddenly shot towards her. It's over. This thought arose in Yinji's mind, because when she saw the sword flying towards her, the sword had already pierced through her forehead and locked onto her soul. She didn't even have the strength to fight back. Yinji was stunned. Who is it? Yi Xian glanced at Yinji, who was locked by the green profound sword. He was the one who asked Qing to be merciful. This woman was still useful to him. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the green profound sword appeared in his hand. Yinji was still locked. There was sword light in his body, the sword light left behind by the plain dress woman. Yi Xian looked at the green profound sword in his hand and smiled. Qing the green profound sword slightly trembled as if it was responding. Yi Xian smiled and said, I won't let you wait too long. The green profound sword trembled, and then calmed down. Gone. At this moment Qing really left, because he could no longer sense Qing's aura. The reason he summoned Qing was because he could sense a trace of Qing's aura through the green profound sword. In other words, Qing was paying attention to this place. But now that wisp of aura had disappeared. There were two possibilities. The first possibility was that Qing had left. The second possibility was that Qing had cut off all contact with him and wanted him to walk the rest of the way on his own. No matter what, he could only rely on himself in the future. After a moment of contemplation, Yi Xian took the green profound sword and entered the stone door. Beyond the stone door was another starry sky. Yi Xian saw that there were more than a dozen super arrays covering the starry sky. These great arrays were all locking down the existing universe below. How generous! Yi Xian's expression turned grave. The strength of the celestial race was much stronger than what he had expected. These formations were definitely not something an ordinary person could construct. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian drew his sword and slashed. Qi! A wisp of sword light tore through space. In an instant, the super arrays in the starry sky were destroyed bit by bit. Yi Xian looked into the distance. At the end of his vision, he vaguely saw an unknown world. God domain. Yi Xian frowned. After a moment of contemplation, he returned below. At this moment, the existing universe had gradually returned to normal. Yinji looked at Yi Xian. Was the green-robed man or the plain-dressed woman? At this moment, she was extremely shocked. She knew that the celestial race had greatly underestimated the people behind Yi Xian. Yi Xian glanced at Yanji and smiled. Let's go back and talk slowly. After saying that, he directly sent Yanji into Xiaota's body. Yi Xian looked at the white-haired elder and Jingji. Maybe it's just the beginning. The white-haired elder and Jingji were silent. They were not in contact with the celestial race, but just a few human puppets cultivated by the celestial race. Now that those human puppets have been killed by them, the next step is to face the celestial race head-on. Without a doubt, the celestial race is stronger. Jingji suddenly looked at Yi Xian. In any case, I will follow you. The white-haired elder hurriedly said. I will follow young Master Yi. Yi Xian. Their intentions were very simple, follow Yi Xian. In any case, Yi Xian will not die. As long as Yi Xian does not die, they will not die. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, Miss Jingji, you have to help me deal with the matters outside this universe. Jingji nodded. I will take care of the matters outside. Some looked at the white-haired elder. Senior, are there any other people around you who are as strong as you? The white-haired elder hesitated and said, There are one or two, but they are very afraid of death. If they are afraid of death, they will not stand up. Yi Xian smiled. What if there are benefits? The white-haired elder's eyes lit up. What benefits? Yi Xian said. For example, going to my tower to cultivate. The white-haired elder said in a low voice. Young Master Yi, are you serious? He had heard of Yi Xian Xiaota's abnormal ability. If he could really cultivate in there, the benefits would be too great for him. Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Senior can go in and cultivate at any time. If Senior's friends are willing to help, they can also go in and cultivate. Not only that, but I can also help Senior and the others reach a higher level. He found that the seal within the white-haired elder's body had not disappeared. The seal left behind by the celestial race. In fact, he was also slightly shocked by the white-haired elder, because this old man had actually cultivated to such a level before the seal was broken. This was very terrifying. Although this old man had not surpassed the divine soul realm, his strength was definitely not weaker than Xiaoan and Jingji. The white-haired elder said in a low voice, Like Miss Jingji and Missin? Yi Xian nodded. The white-haired elder sighed softly. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Senior, why are you sighing? The white-haired elder said softly. Many years ago, I felt that there might be a seal in my body, because no matter how I cultivated, I could not take that last step. At that time, I was not too sure. I never thought that there would be such a seal in our human body. Saying that, he looked at Yi Xian. When I saw your sister that day, I wanted to ask, but she. Saying that, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. He wanted to ask, but he did not dare. He was afraid that this question would be the last one in his life. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, let me help you break the seal first. The white-haired elder bowed respectfully. Thank you. Yi Xian said. You are welcome. Saying that, he opened his palm, and the profound azure sword in his hand directly sank into the white-haired elder's chest. Boom! The white-haired elder's body trembled violently. The next moment, his whole body seemed to be relieved of a heavy burden. It's broken. The white-haired elder took a deep breath. He once again bowed respectfully to Yi Xian. Little friend, Lin Shan will never forget your kindness. Yi Xian said, Senior Lin Shan, go and contact your friends. If they are willing, that is naturally good. If not, we will not force them. Lin Shan nodded. Understood. Saying that, he turned around and left. Yi Xian looked at Jingji. I will leave the outside to you. I want to interrogate this divine human clan woman. Jingji glanced at Yi Xian. Don't use force. Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. What do you mean? Am I Yi Xian that kind of person? Jingji turned around and ran away. Yi Xian was furious. This woman is really. Am I that kind of lecherous person? Without thinking much, Yi Xian returned to Xiaota. Yi Xian walked in front of Yanji. At this moment, Yanji was curiously looking around. Gradually, shock appeared in her eyes. Obviously, she discovered that Xiaota was not simple. Yi Xian was about to speak when Yanji suddenly said with a trembling voice, So the Tao of time and space can reach this level. Saying that, She looked at Yi Xian. Was this Xiao Ta created by the people behind you? Yi Xian looked at Yanji. I want to know everything about the divine human clan. Yanji stared at Yi Xian. What if I don't say? Yi Xian smiled. Then you can disappear from this world. Yanji immediately said. I will say. Yi Xian nodded. Good. Let's begin. I want to know everything about the divine human clan. You can deceive me, but you better deceive me well, because I also like to deceive others. Yanji glanced at Yi Xian, then said, Divine human clan origin divine realm. Yi Xian listened quietly. As he listened, his expression became solemn. This was a race whose martial arts civilization far surpassed that of humans. The two races were not on the same level at all. The divine human clan's division of realms was also very interesting. It was divided into 9 levels, which was even simpler. Yanji's strength was at the peak of level 6, and level 6 was considered above average in the divine human clan. Yi Xian looked at Yanji. You said that the divine human clan wants to exterminate humans because there are people among humans who have surpassed the rules, making you feel uneasy? Yanji nodded. Yi Xian asked again. Is it the plain-dressed woman and the green-robed man? Yanji nodded again. Hearing this, Yi Xian suddenly slapped his thigh. This was an undeserved disaster. Yanji glanced at Yi Xian. Those two are the people behind you. Yi Xian said softly. What do you think the divine human clan will do now? Yanji looked at Yi Xian. You killed those humans at Gate of God. This will make the divine human clan more vigilant, and it will also make the divine human clan more determined to exterminate humans. Yanji looked at Yi Xian. You killed those humans at the Gate of God. This will make the God clan more vigilant, and it will also make the God clan more determined to exterminate the human race. Yanji looked at Yi Xian. Then what do you think I should do now? Yi Xian said with a smile. What do you think I should do now? Yi Xian frowned slightly. Surrender? Yanji nodded. Human, you are a smart person, so I told you these things about the divine human clan. Because you will know that for now, humans will absolutely not be able to stop the divine human clan. Because you will know that for now, the humans absolutely cannot stop the divine race. Just like me, I am restrained now, so I surrender. Living is the most important thing, isn't it? Being alive is the most important thing, isn't it? Yi Xian was speechless. He was speechless. What this woman said seemed to make sense. Yanji said, Young Master Yi, your best choice now is to surrender. Only by surrendering will you have a way to live. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Beg the divine human clan? I can't do it. Yanji sighed. Young Master Yi, I know you are still pinning your hopes on the 2 mysterious experts behind you. I admit that I've underestimated their strength before this. They are very strong, at least rank 7 or rank 8 experts. Let's just treat them as rank 8 experts for the time being. But do you think the 2 of them can fight against the divine human clan? Do you know that before I came, our divine human clan had already put them on the wanted list? But they are now in hiding and don't dare to show their real bodies. If they can really fight against our divine human clan, why do they need to hide? Hide? Yi Xian was stunned. Did you misunderstand something? Yanji frowned. Misunderstanding? There is no misunderstanding. You may not know, but we are using our entire clan to find the man in green and the woman in plain dress. Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. Whenever I don't have any inspiration, I will look at the comments section. Chapter 1856. At this moment, he suddenly felt slightly relaxed. The God clan? Searching for Dad and Qing with the entire clan? Have they gone mad? What exactly happened to make them so confident? He was slightly curious. Do Qing and Dad know that the God clan is searching for them with the entire clan? Meanwhile, Yanji said, Young Master Yi, it's not too late for you to surrender now. Yi Xian glanced at Yanji and said, I'm afraid my father will break my legs. Yanji frowned slightly. Your father? Yi Xian nodded. The azure-clothed man you spoke of. Yanji smiled and said, Young Master Yi, if you surrender to my God clan, Then you'll be able to surpass your father in a few years at most under the nurturing of my god clan. At that time, it's uncertain who will be fighting who." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "To be honest, I'm slightly tempted by your suggestion, but isn't it a bit exaggerated to say that it'll only be a few years at most?" Yanji smiled and said, "You might not know much about our divine Dao civilization. If you do, then you'll know that it really isn't difficult to surpass your father." Yi Xian nodded. "I really don't know much about the divine Dao civilization. However, I know my father very well." Defeat his father? He wanted to as well. But in 2 or 3 years, not to mention cultivating outside, he might not even be able to cultivate in the pagoda. Because even now, he still didn't know what level his father had reached. Yanji was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "Miss Yanji, let's end our chat here. Don't worry, I won't kill you for now. However, I can't let you go either. Stay in my Xiaota for a while." With that, he turned around and left Xiaota. After Yi Xian left, Yanji frowned. A moment later, she opened her palm and wanted to mobilize her strength. However, her expression changed drastically as soon as she did, and she hurriedly gave up. That strand of sword light was still within her body. Yanji slowly closed her eyes. The plainly dressed woman who sealed her was at least a rank 8 expert. Only an 8th level expert could lock her down with a wisp of sword light. 8th phase expert. Yanji's expression became a little complicated. She hadn't expected that a human could reach the 8th phase. The threat was too great. One had to know that although the overall strength of the human race was inferior to the divine race, the number of humans far exceeded the divine race. The reproduction rate of the human race was much more terrifying than that of the god race. Moreover, the learning ability of humans was very strong. If more and more people broke through the seal left by the god race, Yanji slowly closed his eyes. She didn't dare to continue thinking about it. He had to get out. After leaving Xiaota, Yi Xian arrived at the Jiang country of Qingzhou. At this moment, Jiang country had returned to normal. This side was still fine, because there was Mo Yunqi and the others suppressing it, so this place was relatively stable. However, people were also anxious. The end of the universe. Even in the Qing province, there were all kinds of rumors everywhere, causing people to be on tenterhooks. As for other places, although there were Sword Alliance experts suppressing it everywhere, the manpower of Sword Alliance experts was limited, and they couldn't control the entire universe. The current universe was still a little chaotic. On a certain street, Yi Xian was walking slowly with a woman. The woman wore white armor and had a short saber hanging from her waist. The woman was Jiang Jiao. Jiang Jiao turned to look at Yi Xian. "Is the matter about the god race true?" Yi Xian nodded. Jiang Jiao said in a deep voice, "I never thought that we humans were actually created by another race. It sounds really hard to accept." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Me too." Jiang Jiao was a little puzzled. Then why did they want to exterminate humans? Yi Xian said, "Because they discovered that some humans have already escaped their control." Jiang Jiao sighed. "Do we humans have hope?" Yi Xian looked at Jiang Jiao and said softly, "Don't worry, I won't let anything happen to you." Jiang Jiao looked at Yi Xian. "What about the other humans?" Yi Xian went silent. Jiang Jiao hesitated for a moment, and then she said, "I know it's a little selfish of me to ask this, but I can't give up on the people of the state of Jiang. And I can't give up on the students of the academy. We can't let go of too many things." She paused for a moment, and then she said, "I'm sorry. I'll have to carry everything on my shoulders." Yi Xian smiled. "What you can't let go of is what I can't let go of as well." A wisp of a complicated expression flashed in Jiang Jiao's eyes. "You're carrying too much." Yi Xian smiled. And then he said, "Little Jiao, accompany me to a place." Jiang Jiao nodded. "All right." Both of them vanished on the spot. And when they appeared again, they were already at the back mountain of Songlan Academy. Yi Xian brought Jiang Jiao to the depths of the back mountain, and there was a tomb here. Elder Ji's tomb. Yi Xian stood in front of Elder Ji's tomb, and he remained silent. Jiang Jiao just silently accompanied him by his side. After a long time, Yi Xian slowly knelt down. Elder Ji. Worthy for him Yi Xian to kneel. If it wasn't for Elder Ji risking his life to save him back then, he Yi Xian would already be dead. Jiang Jiu also knelt down. Yi Xian said softly, "Little Jiu, do you know? Sometimes I kind of hate my selfish way of thinking." Jiang Jiu asked, "Why?" Yi Xian said, "If Elder Ji was also selfish back then, me Mo Yunqi and Ji, and I would all be dead. And he gave up his life for us." Jiang Jiu was silent. Yi Xian pulled Jiang Jiu up slowly, and he looked at Elder Ji's tomb in front of him, and said with a smile, "I used to be selfish because I only had my younger sister as a relative, but now, I have many relatives and friends. Elder Mu, don't worry. I will protect Songlan Academy. As long as I, Yi Xian, am here, Songlan Academy will always be here." As he spoke, he looked at Jiang Jiu again. "As long as I am here, the state of Jiang is here." Jiang Jiu held on to Yi Xian's hand and said softly, "I'm afraid you're carrying too much on your back." Yi Xian smiled and said, "It's what I should be carrying." Jiang Jiu looked at Yi Xian, and after a long time, she cracked a smile and said, "Do you still remember the first time we met?" Yi Xian nodded. "Of course." Jiang Jiu smiled and said, "At that time, you said that no matter how bad the state of Jiang is, it's still our country, and we can't allow outsiders to trample on it. These words of yours attracted me." Yi Xian laughed heartily. This scene seemed to have brought him back to the past. Jiang Jiu smiled lightly and said, "When facing the divine clan, I can't help you. Not only can I help you, but I might even become your burden. But if you die, don't worry, I, Jiang Jiu, won't live alone." Yi Xian turned to look at Jiang Jiu, and Jiang Jiu smiled and said, "I can't face the divine clan with you, but I can die with you." Yi Xian spoke softly, "We'll both live well." As he spoke, he took Jiang Jiu's hand tightly. Just like that, they walked towards the distance while holding hands. The God Domain. Some experts of the divine clan were gathered within the God Pagoda. The patriarch of the divine clan, Mo Yen, who sat at the seat of the host, glanced at them and said, "The divine entrance has been destroyed." As he spoke, his gaze descended onto Yen. "Aren't you going to explain?" All the gods gazed at Yen. Yen's expression was quite unsightly. She hadn't expected that the humans would actually be able to destroy the divine entrance. After all, while there were very few experts in the divine entrance, there were over a dozen extraordinary formations there, and all of them covered the entire human world. It really couldn't be any easier to annihilate the humans while they were there. However, she hadn't imagined that it wasn't just the divine entrance that had been destroyed. Even those formations had been destroyed. Meanwhile, the Grand Elder of the Divine Clan, Yinju, spoke abruptly. "Looks like this human is about to escape our control." Hearing this, the faces of the gods in the hall darkened. Mo Yin spoke abruptly. "These humans must be destroyed as soon as possible. If they're allowed to rise, then wouldn't our divine clan become the laughingstock of the world?" As he spoke, he gazed at Yen. "Yen, I'll send someone else if you don't have the strength to do so." Yen spoke solemnly. "There's no need. I'll head there myself this time." Mo Yen nodded. "You can deploy some divine generals. Will 6 be enough?" Yen spoke indifferently. 3 will be enough." Mo Yen nodded. "Deploy 3 divine generals. I don't want any mishaps to occur this time." Yen nodded slightly, and was about to leave. Meanwhile, the Grand Elder, Yinju, spoke abruptly. "We don't seem to have figured out why the divine entrance was destroyed." Yen frowned when she heard this. Why had the divine entrance been destroyed? She hadn't even tried to figure it out. Meanwhile, Yinju spoke solemnly. "Yen, investigate this matter once you head down there. Because it's quite strange, so take 6 divine generals with you just in case." Yen thought for a moment and nodded. "All right." Yinju continued. "Remember not to be careless. Although these humans were created by the divine race, they already have their own martial arts civilization. Moreover, there are some humans that have jumped out of the rules that we have set. This means that there might be some special powerhouses among them. In short, don't underestimate them or be careless. Return immediately if you're no match for them." Yen nodded. "Understood." She turned around and left once she finished speaking. Mo Yen suddenly asked after Yi Yin left. Is there any news from Yu Qin? An elder shook his head. No. Mo Yen frowned. He still hasn't found the woman in a plain dress and the green-clothed man. That elder spoke solemnly. No. Elder Yu Qin inferred that they might have fled the god domain. Now, he's leading his men to the infinite world outside the god domain to search for them. The infinite world. Mo Yin frowned when he heard this. The infinite world wasn't under the god clan's jurisdiction. Mo Yin spoke solemnly. Have they fled to that place? The elder spoke solemnly. It's very likely, because we would have found them a long time ago, if they were still in the god domain. However, we've searched the entire god domain, and haven't found any traces of them. So there's only one explanation, and it's that they've headed to the infinite world. Mo Yen pondered deeply for a moment before he said, Continue searching. Send more men. Besides that, send a bounty to the infinite world. Anyone who provides information about them will be rewarded with 2 spirit crystal mines. The elder nodded slightly. Understood. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. It didn't take long for a bounty to arrive at the infinite world. Chapter 1857. Ian arrived at the divine gate. At this moment, there was no one at the gate of God. As for the great arrays inside the gate of God, they had all been destroyed. Ian looked around. The next moment she disappeared. When she reappeared, she was already in the human world. When she sensed the auras of countless humans, she frowned. She did not like humans very much. After a while, Ian suddenly said, Ask the people from the theological seminary to rebuild the formation. I'll go investigate. Behind Ian, a divine general left quietly. Ian disappeared from where she was. When she reappeared, she was already in an ancient city. At the moment, the ancient city was in chaos. Cries of distress could be heard everywhere. Ian glanced at the entire city, a mocking smile on his lips. You're indeed a lowly race. Even at a time like this, they were actually killing each other. Seriously. Suddenly, a sword howl resounded from within the city. A moment later, a voice resounded from within the city. And then another voice resounded from every corner of the city. My Sword Alliance is taking control of this city. From this moment onward, all who dare to cause trouble will be killed without mercy. Sword Alliance. Ian frowned. In next to no time, shrill cries resounded in the city. But it didn't take long for the city to slowly regain its calm. Seeing this, Ian's face darkened. Someone was maintaining order. Sword Alliance. Without a second thought, she disappeared on the spot. All Heaven City. Ian went straight to the Sword Alliance's sword hall. There was only one person in the hall. It was the sword maniac. The sword addict looked at Ian calmly. Ian sized him up and said, Where's the sword master of your Sword Alliance? Sword maniac asked. You are? Ian pressed down with his right hand. Sword addict's pupils shrank as she drew her sword and slashed. Boom! The sword light shattered. And the sword maniac was suppressed by a mysterious force. A mocking smile appeared on Ian's face. So weak. As she spoke, she was about to attack again. Meanwhile, a man had appeared in front of the sword crazy. When Yi Yen entered the Sword Alliance, she had already informed Yi Xian. Yi Xian sized up Yi Yen. God! Yi Yen sneered. Looks like you're not that stupid. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword. A wisp of sword light flashed past. Ian narrowed his eyes and flicked his sleeves. Boom! The sword light shattered, and Yi Xian returned to his original position. But the next moment, a sword appeared in front of Ian without warning. Ian blocked with his arm. Boom! Ian retreated out of the sword temple. Outside the hall, Ian looked at her right arm. At that moment, there was a deep sword wound on her right arm. His defense had been broken. Seeing this, Ian's face instantly turned ferocious. She looked at Yi Xian in the distance and said, You lowly human, how dare you hurt me? Yi Xian looked at Ian. You're being racist. If other forces can summon an ancestor, then our Sword Alliance should be able to as well, right? Sword Maniac said. We can't, but you're the Sword Master's son. You should be able to call him father, right? Yi Xian shook his head. I can't. Sword Maniac frowned. Yi Xian looked around carefully and said, I even suspected that I wasn't his biological son. With that he returned to Xiao Ta. In the sword hall, Sword Maniac hesitated for a moment and said, Has the sword master been cuckolded? The man in green was speechless. After Yi Xian returned to Xiao Ta, he went to find Yanji. When he saw Yi Xian, Yanji hurriedly said, Young Master Yi, have you thought about surrendering? Yi Xian glanced at Yanji and smiled. I have that thought, but I don't think your divine Tao civilization is that great. Yanji frowned slightly. How could that be? If you come into contact with our divine Tao civilization, then you. Yi Xian suddenly said. You said before that you're a teacher of some seminary. Yanji nodded. Yes. Yi Xian said seriously. Then help me improve. Let me see just how great your divine Tao civilization is. Yanji glanced at Yi Xian. You're trying to fool me. Yi Xian smiled. I just want to see your divine Tao civilization. Look, I'm already so powerful without coming into contact with your divine Tao civilization. If your divine Tao civilization isn't so powerful, then wouldn't I be at a disadvantage? Yanji fell silent. Yi Xian looked at Yanji. Come, let me see your divine Tao civilization. Yanji said solemnly. If you don't surrender after your divine Tao civilization helps you improve, then what? Yi Xian raised his right hand. I swear. If I don't surrender after the divine Tao civilization helps me improve, then I'll. Yanji suddenly said. Swear in the name of your family. Yi Xian thought for a moment. Then he said, My father will be hacked to death. Yanji hesitated for a moment. Then he said, Your oath is a little too vicious. I believe you. Yi Xian. Third level civilization. Yi Xian was shocked. Level 3? You only belong to a level 3 civilization? Yanji frowned. Is level 3 very low? Yi Xian said. Aren't there 7 levels in total? You're only level 3, isn't that low? Yanji said angrily. You humans can't even be considered level 1. Yi Xian was speechless. Yanji said again. Do you know how terrifying a level 3 civilization is? A level 3 civilization already understands the essence of life and can create life. Not only that, but they can also understand the essence of time and space. As for you humans are still exploring time and space. As for the essence of life, you humans don't even have this concept. Yi Xian was silent. Currently, the powerhouses in this universe were indeed still studying time and space. As for the essence of life, it seemed like no one was studying this. Yanji said again. Do you know why you humans are trapped here? Because you haven't even fully understood the Tao of time and space. We just drew a circle and trapped you in this universe. Yi Xian nodded. Compared to you humans, we are indeed very backward. Yanji glanced at Yi Xian. You humans have no chance against the god race. Yi Xian suddenly said. This chapter is not finished. Please continue. I met a woman before. I fought with her. She doesn't seem to be that powerful. Then, he described the woman's appearance. Yanji frowned slightly. Elder Yan. Yi Xian asked. Is that woman an elder of your god race? Yanji nodded. Yes. Yi Xian said. She doesn't seem to be suppressing me. Yanji pointed at the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand. The next time you meet her, try not to use this sword. Yi Xian looked at his green profound sword. Is it because of this sword? Yanji said calmly. This sword can allow you to ignore the suppression of time and space. Otherwise, just the suppression of time and space alone will be enough to beat you up. Yi Xian was silent. Suppression of time and space. He thought of the great life water. If he didn't have this green profound sword, he would have been beaten up. This woman named Yi Yan's strength and Tao of time and space must be above the great life water. Yanji said again. Your strength is not much, but your sword and the sword skills you use are very unusual. This is why you can injure a god. Yi Xian was silent for a moment then smiled. Miss Yanji, come. Tell me about this divine Tao civilization. I want to improve myself, and at the same time, See how amazing your divine Tao civilization is. Yanji thought for a moment, then said, your current realm is equivalent to a level 4. But if you use the sword in your hand, your strength is equivalent to a level 6. Yixian smiled. Then let's start now. Yanji said solemnly. Then let's start with time and space. We'll start with the basics. In the following time, Yixian began to listen to Yanji's explanation. It had to be said that Yanji was really good. She was a teacher, and her explanation was really detailed and easy to understand. And her explanation also opened a new door for Yixian. Time and space. Compared to the god race, humans were indeed much weaker. The god race had only set up a restriction in this space-time, and humans could not jump out of the circle. Space-time restriction. In fact, he was a little worried about Qing, and his father. After talking in detail with Yanji, he more or less understood this endless universe. What level did Qing, belong to in this endless universe? If she was measured in terms of civilization, what level of civilization did she belong to? He did not know. The Gate of God. At this moment inside the Gate of God, Yen was leading a group of God race scholars to rebuild a formation. Although Yi Xian had destroyed the formation here, he did not know that as long as this place was not destroyed, even if the formation was destroyed, it could still be rebuilt. In fact, the God race could directly send people to destroy the existing universe below. But this was a bit of a waste of time. If they used a formation, they could directly target the entire universe. At this moment, an old God race suddenly walked in front of Yen and bowed slightly. Elder Yen, the formation will be completed in half a month at most. Half a month? Yen smiled. Good. Hurry up, I don't want to give the humans below too much time. The old man nodded. Understood. With that he retreated. Yen looked up into the starry sky and said softly, I wonder if they found the woman in the plain dress and the man in green. The infinite realm. The infinite realm no longer belonged to the God realm. It was a world outside of the God realm. This world was infinitely large, and there were many messy forces in it. Even the God race was wary of these forces. The universe was so big, the God race was not invincible. In the infinite realm, there was a small city, Desolation City. This city was not big, but it had a long history. It had existed for millions of years. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. And this city had a special place. It was the only safe place in the infinite realm. The entire infinite realm was chaotic. Even the God race would not let their clansmen enter this world easily. But in Desolation City, it was very safe, because no one dared to make a move here. And the reason why no one dared to make a move here was because the city lord was said to be a powerhouse who had surpassed the 9th rank. In a shabby tea house, Yu Chen of the God race sat quietly. He had been here for more than 10 days, but he still could not find the woman in the plain dress. But it was not like there was no news at all. At this time a tree man walked in. The tree man walked in front of Yu Chen and looked at him. Something. Yu Chen opened his palm, and a storage ring appeared in his hand. The tree man opened his palm, but Yu Chen had no intention of giving it to him. The tree man looked at Yu Chen. Are you messing with me? Yu Chen smiled. I am afraid that you are messing with me. After a moment of silence, the tree man said, More than 10 days ago, I saw that woman heading east. Yu Chen frowned. East? The tree man nodded. After a moment of silence, Yu Chen put down the storage ring, stood up and left. The tree man put away the storage ring, turned around and left. After Yu Chen left the tea house, he led everyone to the east. Roughly 4 hours later, Yu Chen had already brought the 3 divine generals to a black hole. As soon as they entered the black hole, they felt an extremely terrifying force enveloping them, as if it was about to tear them apart. Yu Chen furrowed his brows. He pressed his right hand forward, and the terrifying force around him disappeared without a trace. Just then, a black figure appeared not far away from Yu Chen and the others. Yu Chen's face changed at the sight of the figure. Your Emperor Jun, a 9th rank Emperor Jun. What was he doing here? Emperor Jun looked at Yu Chen in silence. Yu Chen glanced at Emperor Jun, and noticed that he was missing a hand. Was he injured? Emperor Jun asked. Are you from the divine humans? Yuchen quickly nodded. Yes. He knew that Emperor Jun was friends with the divine humans, so he relaxed a lot. Emperor Jun nodded. I am friends with your Grand Supreme Elder. How is he? Yuchen smiled. Grand Supreme Elder is in seclusion. Emperor Jun pondered for a moment, then asked, Why are you here? Yuchen bowed at once and said, Your Excellency, we are here to find a woman in a plain dress. A woman in a plain dress. Emperor Jun's eyelid twitched and his body trembled. Yuchen added, Your Excellency, this woman has an irreconcilable feud with the divine humans. If Your Excellency sees her, please inform us and we will be eternally grateful. An irreconcilable feud. Emperor Jun was stunned, then quickly turned around and said in horror, Senior, I have nothing to do with the divine humans. I have an irreconcilable feud with them as well. Hearing this, Yuchen was stunned. Not far away, there was a woman in a plain dress. Yuchen narrowed his eyes at the sight of her. He clenched his right hand, and a powerful force began to gather within him. The woman stared at Yuchen. You! Before the plain dress woman could finish her words, Yuchen suddenly disappeared from the spot. He had attacked. He did not like to waste his breath before making a move. All he knew was that Daoi had a principle. Those who attack first gain the upper hand. Those who attack later suffer the consequences. Those who like to waste their breath usually met a tragic end. Attack first and gain the upper hand. End of this chapter. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.